Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are going to have yet another one of our amazing late night conversations. So glad to be here with all of you. A lot of great things happening in the world, a lot of bad things as well. But we're making our contribution. We're doing our part. So let's do it. Let's have a great conversation.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hello, everybody. I am so glad that you were here tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. A lot is happening in the world. So the way we do these streams is I give my opening remarks, which is whatever it is I'm going to talk about for the opening remarks. Then after that, we do a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who is on the other side of the camera, who's part of our community here on this YouTube channel. And then after that's all done, we then answer people's questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you want me to answer, react to, respond to, comment on in the second half, do what Reestablishment just did and send me a super chat. On YouTube, you can send me a super chat. On the Rumble, you can send me a Rumble rant. And on the Rockfin, you can send me a Rockfin tip. One way or another, you can talk to me and you can ask me about things. That's the way this works. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. As you see from Reestablishment Super Chat, we do have an important event happening on Saturday. Less than 5 days away. I'll be in Portland, Oregon. Scott Ritter will be in Portland, Oregon. Garland Nixon will be in Portland, Oregon. Craig Postage, our doula, will be in Portland, Oregon. Peter Coffin will be in Portland, Oregon. Syed Husseini will be in Portland, Oregon. David Rovics will be in Portland, Oregon, though he's always there because he lives there, but he'll be performing at our event. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be absolutely awesome. And we have now made public the venue. This event will be taking place in Oregon City, which is just outside of Portland, Oregon, and it will be at the Tumwater Ballroom. So the Tumwater Ballroom in Portland, Oregon will be the venue of our great event. It's a museum. It's on the top floor of a museum. Just a beautiful, absolutely beautiful spot in Oregon City, right outside of Portland, Oregon. That is where we are having this epic, revolutionary, anti-imperialist conference. Peter Coffin's making a documentary film about it. The night before, we're having an event with Jyoti Brar. The day after, we're having a religious event. We're doing protests throughout the week. I mean, so much is happening. I am going to be in Portland from Wednesday until December 12th, and we are going to try to get as much done during that time as we possibly can. And great outreach is going. People are registering. We're up to 123 people that have registered for the conference, and the press release just started going out a couple hours ago. You don't want to miss this. You absolutely don't want to miss this. You want to be there in that room. You want to be there in that room with the big names of anti-imperialism. You want to be there. So spread the word far and wide. Register. Link is down below to register. Send us a donation because it's getting tight. Like I said, every little bit helps. Send us a donation if you can. That's where I'm going to be starting 2 days from now, I will be in Portland, Oregon, and I'm going to be there for quite some time to make sure that shit gets done. To make sure that shit gets done. To make sure that anti-imperialism has a movement. I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited. So make sure that you register if you haven't registered. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So that was just my quick announcement. Now I'll get to my opening remarks. Then after my opening remarks, we do the roll call. And then after that, I answer people's super chat questions. So folks, I don't know if you're aware, but it is a really important thing in our circles. It's a really important thing globally, that in addition to the horrendous indictment that has been rained down on the Uhuru movement, a group of Black revolutionary socialists and anti-imperialists, the followers of Chairman O'Malley, the Uhuru movement, the African People's Socialist Party, they have been indicted. They are facing a decade in prison for allegedly being Russian agents. It's a frightening case. That's happening here in the United States. In addition to that, now in Britain, our good friends, the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, are facing criminal indictments as well. Now, they've charged here in the United States, the Uhuru movement, they've charged them with being Russian agents, which is ridiculous because they've been organizing for Black people's rights since the 1970s. The idea that what they're doing is somehow a conspiracy from Russia is absurd. However, it's a creative loophole manipulation of the legal system to target them. Well, now we see the same thing happening in Britain. They have manipulated the legal system to indict Comrade Ranjeet and 3 other members of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. And they're charging them with inciting racial hatred. That's the charge against them. And they were at a protest on Saturday, and the police were walking around from literature table to literature table, inspecting the literature to see if anyone had anything that they could use a loophole in their hate crimes laws to target them. And they found their pamphlet, which is a very, very anti-racist pamphlet, which is a very, very pro-Jewish pamphlet. In fact, the title of the pamphlet is Zionism, a racist, anti-Semitic, and reactionary tool of imperialism. But they saw that pamphlet and the cover of that pamphlet, and they threw the handcuffs on them. Absolutely unacceptable. But they're using the law that they used to go after neo-Nazis and skinheads. They're using the law that they use for people who spray paint racial slurs on people's homes. They're using that to protest, to target comrades who just peacefully protested. And we have some new video of their arrest. We saw the initial arrest video. I showed that on my stream on Saturday. I got more video to show you now.
Police are upset with us. Do you mind if we talk to them for a second?
Yeah.
So sorry. Well, welcome to the state.
Sorry, I need that book as well. Right, so we've assessed the book.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Okay, our crime department has assessed the book.
Yeah, no problem.
They're satisfied it is a crime. We will therefore seize the literature and obtain your details.
Oh wow.
It's getting seized.
It's getting seized.
Okay, so guys, what we need from you, because I'd rather have a positive engagement here.
I want a positive engagement.
Thank you.
Inspector McDonald, you know I want to engage with you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can you just record for me? Excuse me, can you? I want to receipt for what you're seizing.
Right.
Can you just count how many books you're taking?
What we do? Do you want to do it? Do you want to do this over here?
We'll do this over here, out the way.
And you just give me a recording receipt. And if I just have your name and number, would that be alright?
Yes, Sergeant.
But as long as you're
Sergeant,
gonna
sure.
give a receipt.
I'll try my best.
And then later on,
We won't make a profit out of it, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's fine. You can take that up with our crime department. What we will need from you in order to deal with this properly, your name, the names of the 4 people who are working on the stall today.
Not a problem.
What we are going to do is we'll put on a report that a public order offence has taken place. Our crime team will contact you as to whether or not you need to be interviewed.
Not a problem.
Or whatever course of action they decide to take.
And can you just tell me, just so I know, what the crime is at this stage?
Yes, it's Section 5 of the Public Order Act.
Section 5
Yeah.
means creating
It's an offence where,
creating a public disturbance.
well, it's not public disturbance, it's where you might be caused offence through...
And so have you had an official complaint from a member of the
no,
public?
but there could be. There could be. Yeah.
So you anticipate
I
that there
don't
might
want
be...
it-
You see that? There is nobody who's complained about it. There's no victim in this crime. There was not a single, there wasn't a Jewish person who walked by and said, oh, I'm offended by that. Nobody was even offended by it. There's no victim here. All they did was make a political statement, and the police were walking through all the literature tables and going, I don't know if that's okay. No one called the police and said, I'm offended by this. So they've been charged with inciting racial hatred. When the police officer who's arresting them even says that, yeah, no one's actually been harmed here. All you did was, I mean, yeah, he said, hey, but there could be, right? They didn't even read it. Of course they didn't read it. The title itself condemns anti-Semitism.
To get to that situation.
No, it's okay. I don't mind. It's just so I understand.
Yeah. So we haven't had a complaint as such, but I won't allow it to get to that situation.
So there's been no complaint. So just so I understand.
No complaint.
So there's been no complaint.
Yeah.
But there's Section 5 of the Public
Order Act.
Okay. And the words
it's
of that
racially aggravated as well because of the symbol.
Racially aggravated.
Yeah.
What?
Because of the symbol and the meaning of the symbol, it could be construed as
I understand.
Racially aggravated towards Jewish people.
It's not a race, it's a religion.
All right. Well.
But all right.
Nevertheless,
I'm
it's
not
going
going to
to be
argue
seized.
with.
We'll put on a report.
But your reason. But as a representative of the police, I'm not having a debate with you. But just so I understand, it's a Section 5.
Of the Public
Order offence, and a racially so I've committed a race crime.
Well, that's an allegation.
But no one's complained. But I might have done.
Well, it's not that somebody has complained.
Or you're worried
now,
that I might have done.
worried that
On
the
behalf of
situation
anyone who might be offended.
Sure. So I'm glad we've got an understanding. So what we'll do is we'll take your details.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you. You can have my details. I'm a law-abiding citizen who believes in truth, justice, freedom of speech, the right of the people to know the truth, all that kind of stuff.
So we're not saying a disturbance has happened, we just don't want...
You're just not in favour of that book being sold to members of the public.
It's the symbol on the front of the books there, isn't it? That could cause problems.
No.
And we're just trying to make
Well, I don't accept that, but you think so. You're worried about the cover of the book rather than the contents of the book.
Yeah, well, the cover could be construed as offensive to certain people at the moment with the current climate. That's the only reason.
No problem. So you're worried.
Details in a second.
No, that's fine.
So they are judging a book by its cover. Somebody might see the cover and get their feelings hurt, and that's why they were eventually arrested. Did you hear that? They didn't read the book or the contents of the book, but they said that somebody could potentially walk by in the current political climate and see the cover of the book and get their feelings hurt. And that is why they're being arrested.
And then you'll be updated.
And you're worried, Officer Stevens.
That's basically where we are, and that's where
I might offend someone in the future in the current climate. Yeah. And what is the current climate? The current climate is like there's a genocide happening, and like 14,000 people have been murdered. And I'm here exposing and campaigning against the genocide, which is supported by a government. And you're saying that's Ranjeet Brown. So I actually work for the state like you. I'm a surgeon. I work for the NHS. I work for the police. We both work for the government. But what you're saying is, Inspector MacDonald, that I might have committed a racial criminal offence by selling a history of Zionism.
Please let this be a two-way conversation because you're quite dominant here.
I'm so sorry. You know, it's the nature of my personality. I can't help it. But I am trying to collaborate. And I'm just trying to understand.
Try and listen.
Because you just seized about 200 quid's worth of lit from me.
What I don't want
and you're saying that because I've committed a race crime. And to me, as a person of Indian origin, And then
That
you're
doesn't
coming
preclude you
telling me
from- that doesn't preclude
no,
you
it doesn't.
from committing
But
a
what you can
racial
say is that
offence.
I'm someone who's known racism and knows what racism is, and I've been an anti-racist campaigner all my life.
So you'd
So
understand
to have
then
no,
that
to have a
investigate
policeman tell me and say
Yeah.
I'm coming and committing a race crime
I
is
didn't
an
say you
unusual
had.
experience.
I didn't say you had. I said
And
we're
yet
gonna
you've
investigate
seized
whether
my
or not.
literature on the basis that I have.
Yes.
So the accusation
Okay,
is
so
in.
yeah, so
And you're instituting
You won't-
criminal
this is all one way,
proceedings
so
against
we're not
me.
getting anywhere. Let's
But
just
it is
take the
true.
details.
But I'm just like
We'll
repeating what
just
you're
take
saying.
details.
You can do that. I'm going to give them to you live. I want other people to come and visit me as well. This is fun. Hello guys. I've got a detective constable. That's quite a high rank. Hello Philip. Detective means CID basically. Are you CID? But you're CID. Are you CID? No. Fair enough. Oh, that's fine. So is he in charge? Are you a captain? Inspector McDonald. And what's your first name, Mr. McDonald? But you're not Mr. You're Inspector, right? It's alright. This is not hostile at all. I really like you, man. I've genuinely enjoyed speaking to you, and I understand you're following orders. But the order's deeply flawed order, man. But it's very interesting to me because there's a similar thing they did to Jeremy Corbyn, where they accused him of being a racist, and basically they took him out of the leadership of one of the main parties of our government. And this idea of weaponizing, no, it's the same thing. But this is political.
No,
but you're actually political. You're enforcing currently.
That's political. This is criminal.
No, but you're saying it's criminal. But actually, this is political policing.
Because it's been assessed.
But to use
criminal criteria.
I know, but what I'm saying is
So
you're
that's two
enforcing.
separate issues.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. I'm not against you. But it's very interesting that you're being used to push forward, essentially, an agenda of political policing, of political criticism of Israel and its crimes. And I feel sorry for you that you're having to do that. You're a very nice person. I've got no issues. I'm not having a fight. There's no violence. It's very interesting because it's a purely intellectual debate about the character of oppression. And yet that government, because they pay you, they pay me as well. They pay me as well.
Expertise and intellect here is superior to mine. I'm not going to.
I'm not trying to say I'm superior to you. I'm not superior to you in any way. But what I am, no. I'm absolutely not coming from an angle of I'm superior or I know better. That's not what I'm saying. But I do know because I know what I'm selling.
Yeah.
And I know what I'm giving out is knowledge, which is true.
Is that how cops speak in Britain, right? I just want you to know that your prestige and intellect is superior to mine. I can't imagine an American cop ever talking that way. Well, your prestige and intellect is superior to mine. Did he just say that? That's just what in the world is going on there? What in the world is going on there? I must be missing something, right? Is that some kind of like British burn? Clearly your intellect and prestige is superior to mine. Well, I mean, it is. Yes, it is. But why is he like, that's odd.
And I've written to a PhD level in many, many things. And that's okay, but this is truth. And therefore it's very interesting to label the truth as being racism as a protection from the truth is an interesting thing. And you're being asked to enforce it, which is not your fault. But it is political policing, and it is, if you like, the death of freedom of speech in our country. And in that respect, it's very interesting. It's not your fault. I don't blame you.
Ranjeet, can I just grab your details, please? Have you got a driving license or any proof of ID, please?
I don't with me, no. I don't carry
any,
no, but I'll tell you the
proof
truth.
of
It's okay.
ID. What's your full name then?
My name is Ranjeet, R-A-N-J-E-E-T.
R-A-N-J.
J-E-E-T.
E-E-T.
Yeah, Bra. B-R. A-R.
A-R.
Yeah.
Bra.
Bra, it's an Indian name.
Yeah.
It's a Punjabi Indian name.
And your date of birth?
Is so I might just turn off the camera now. I don't want to tell all my friends my.
I turn off the camera then.
All righty. Yeah. And we know what happened. Eventually, they put handcuffs on him and dragged him and 3 other comrades to jail. They were held for something like 26 hours. They were held in lockup. And then they were released from jail with special court orders forbidding them from passing out any literature until their trial date. You should see that they are actually, it is a court order that until they go to trial, they can't hand out literature or else they're in violation of a court order. And this is the free capitalist West. Can you believe it? Right? This is that American, free, British, Western democracy, right, that we're supposed to believe in. I mean, it actually says in their court order that they cannot hand out any more literature from now until their trial date. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And that is why, in light of this happening, we are even more excited for the fact that his sister, the sister of the free speech criminal, the free speech martyr that we just saw in the video, the persecuted victim there who was arrested, his sister is coming to Portland, right? That's Jyoti. That's our friend Jyoti Brar, who was at our conference in March. She's flying in. She's flying to Portland, and she's going to be speaking at our event, and she will be speaking. And we put in the press release that we put out today. She is going to bring as many copies of the illegal pamphlet as she possibly can. And I think we are going to take selfies where the whole crowd, every single one of us, holds up the pamphlet, and we're going to say, "Come arrest us, London Metropolitan Police," and we'll have every single person holding up a copy of that pamphlet. This is absolutely ridiculous. If they're going to start arresting people in Britain for having hateful symbols, what about the Union Jack? Right? They think that talk about hateful symbols that are associated with genocide and racism and murder. That Union Jack presided over genocide in India, genocide in Africa, genocide in Asia, brutal crimes against humanity, forced starvation. If they're going to start talking about offensive symbols, Britain's flag should be the first symbol that they outlaw, right? So give me a break. Give me a break. If you want to talk about something that would offend people, I mean, good night. Good night. But anyway, this is pretty wild. Now, I am so excited about our organization, the Center for Political Innovation, and all we've been doing lately. So that, just a couple of weeks ago, our good member, John McCarthy, who just sent a super chat that we'll be addressing for sure in the second half of our show. Our good member, John McCarthy, represented us at the Black People's March to support the Uhuru movement, and that was very awesome. That was very, very awesome. And we showed his speech on here. And now another member of our organization, Elizabeth Young, just represented us in Athens, Greece at the World Anti-Imperialist Platform International Gathering. And she gave a speech about opportunism and the synthetic left. And she crammed a lot into just 10 minutes. I'm going to show Center for Political Innovation President Elizabeth Young speaking before the Athens gathering of 35 different communist parties from around the world that gathered in Athens, Greece to have a convention to support the center, to support Russia and China and People's Korea and the Palestinians and Iran, the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. This is our members speaking to their gathering.
It is the basic duty of revolutionaries in imperialist countries to welcome the defeat of their own ruling class. This is the concept known as revolutionary defeatism. Instead of defending or upholding the status of one's own country, you welcome its upheaval. Though the ruling class in the imperialist bloc is against the working people who make its wheels turn, and though it cuts into the wages and a collective ability of workers at every turn, the expectation of every imperialist society is an ardent defense of the ruling class. Institutional binding constrains workers from approaching the upheaval of this system. So to unlock this understanding of revolutionary defeatism is truly revolutionary. Even if the targets of US government hostility were imperialist, it would still be correct to welcome their advance. It would still be correct to welcome the victory of Russia in Ukraine and to welcome the success of One China. It is never appropriate for a revolutionary to side with its own imperialist bourgeoisie, and this is fundamental. In every conflict, the pressure to be swayed is cacophonous, and the underlying threat to dissenters is palpable. So-called experts in lies are thrust forward in a sounding chorus. The revolutionary defeatist is subject to total social abjection. It is critical to point out that Russia and China are not imperialists. Lenin's definition of imperialism describes export of capital and banks and corporations based in Western countries seizing parts of the world in territorial partition, and subsequently preventing the Third World from developing. These imperialist countries extract super profits on the basis of preventing economic stability and implementing aggressive destabilization programs. The imperialist powers must maintain a dependent and subservient relationship with the rest of the world in order to reap these huge profits and sustain their dying and decaying economic system. Russia and China's economies do the opposite of this, because they enable the countries they trade with to flourish. They do not rake in super profits by seizing parts of the world or by their influence. Rather, their investment results in a beneficial exchange and structural development. Russia's economy is centered around exporting its own oil and gas. China's economy is centered around state-run industries and a heavily controlled private sector. Neither of their economies is held together by seizing the development of any other country in order to extract super profits. Imperialism has an economic definition, and it is not a policy or action, rather it is an economic system. This definition of imperialism is persistently muddled and mystified through language and the social apparatus. Viewpoints that abstract imperialism away from this economic basis are foisted upon the people of the imperialist countries at every turn. A vague and tenuous grasp of economic systems propel young radicals and dissidents away from a sound understanding of imperialism, and they crash back and forth, being tossed by every new academic abstraction and news item. There is a reason why so many so-called socialists in the Western sphere of influence are neutral or even support the US-NATO position on Ukraine, while falling into an easy rhythm of condemning Russia and demonizing China. Any finger wagging at the US military-industrial complex is couched in this demonization of anti-imperialist powers. And in that way, they perfectly serve the imperialist agenda that seeks to gin up hostility and support among the masses of people for intervention and military escalation. The expression of talking out of both sides of your mouth comes to mind. The liberal legitimacy of the academic and managerial class in the imperialist countries require these two faces, and they supplant revolutionary defeatism. There is an ease and moral superiority in being against everything, and that marks this intellectual and anti-activist class. But a fight that upholds this economic status quo is only play-acting revolutionary affectation. It is a put-on. The nonprofit industrial complex and the academic streams that feed the activist workers and students are from this poisoned well, which produces a perilous confusion. The channels for funding activism are constrained by NGOs which are profitable on the basis of catering to enormous foundations that accrue their money and influence through imperialist plunder and require the maintenance of that imperialist plunder. Similarly, research and publications are constricted by the whims of universities that act in the same manner and require defense to the supremacy of identity. In this sphere, the cultural is primary, and academic jargon flourishes in books and media, and through the incessant use of arcane language at every institutional level. With all of this nudging, the socially proper views of woke and the reaction to them, anti-woke, become mainstream currents that seem to occur as some inevitability. But in actuality, this is a calculated social engineering that forwards a limited framework and is a single imperialist imperative. Marxism is, in the Western understanding, a model for cultural deconstruction and articulation, but is made to never touch the economics on which it is actually based. In this framework, injustice is a discrete happening to be rooted out, but is propelled through institutional systemics and power stemming from an abstraction known as whiteness. There is certainly an...
Yeah, it could never be capitalism, imperialism, super exploitation. No. It's got to be white skin privilege or whiteness or male patriarchal supremacy. It can never be, right? This is what she's getting at here. They just can't ever use the language that led to the Bolshevik Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Korean Revolution, the language that led to millions of people being lifted out of poverty around the world, the language that created the modern civil rights movement. They can't ever use the genuine Marxist language, right? That's why they dug up Gramsci and published his prison notebooks in the 1960s. It's this, they just can't use the communist language, right? All the woke academics that get their Ford Foundation money to talk about oppression theory, they just can't use the language of Marxism. They just can't do it, because if they did that, they would be granting legitimacy to the forces that have actually defeated all of this injustice. Very important point.
Assurance being made to the ruling class in this intellectual product. Assuredly, any word or action, no matter how hostile to capitalism, will never be permitted to touch the material economic system that is imperialism. Assuredly, Western Marxism will be a symbol of rage, an outlet for discontent, but remain completely void of power or incisive ability. As Lenin stated, it has been shown in practice that working class activists who follow the opportunist trend are better defenders of the bourgeoisie than the bourgeoisie themselves. Without their leadership of the workers, the bourgeoisie could not remain in power. And yet, for the first time since the end of the Second World War, economic conditions have led the US working class to be more anti-establishment than ever. The material realities of extreme wealth disparity and economic stagnation have illuminated unspoken truths and have resulted in a great deal of skepticism toward official media narratives. Working class people are now opposing wars in numbers unseen. Even with all of this potential, the prevailing wisdom among socialists is that these are fascists who are spreading conspiracy theories. The Western left mobilizes defense of the establishment against populist dissent, and with their condemnation and ridicule, they help route this raw dissent into the safe parameters of anti-woke.
Very true. That's what happens, right? When somebody starts to speak against the establishment, but doesn't do so in, woke language, they get labeled a fascist and they get called transphobic and racist and all of that. And so then what do? They just become Trump supporters, right? And they have created this atmosphere where your job as a socialist or communist is to defend Joe Biden from Donald Trump. Bullshit. I have no duty to defend Joe Biden, right? And that trap of everyone who doesn't use politically correct, woke academic language to voice their opposition to the status quo, everyone who's actually questioning these wars is a right winger who's spreading conspiracy theories. That creates a situation where many of the people in the working class who do oppose the status quo end up just becoming part of this anti-woke Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis bullshit, right? So yeah, it's a trap, and we need to not fall into that trap.
We see the proof that there is a great need to go out of the movement to reach the masses and cut ties with the primary leftist entities. We take up the directive to get past the Western leftist held spaces and methods and the US radical nostalgia and the elitist phrases disguised as Marxism, and instead actually approach working class people with an anti-war, anti-monopoly message and an economic populist program of demands. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. In just less than 10 minutes, she laid it all out there. Why CPI was formed, what Out of the Movement to the Masses is about, why we have to break with the left and go to the masses with an anti-imperialist program. I think our president, Elizabeth Young, did a fantastic job. Proud to have her as the president of our organization. She's done tremendous work. and she'll do a great job coming up. She's been organizing this conference, doing a great job, and we love her work. Now, also in Athens, they did compose a declaration that was signed by CPI and all the attendees at their conference. And Jyoti Brar, she read the declaration in English to close out the session. So here's Jyoti reading the declaration.
That we are emerging from the period of deep reaction that followed the capitalist restoration in the Soviet Union and the East European socialist bloc, when the strength of the capitalist imperialist system seemed overwhelming and the forces of national liberation and socialism were in retreat. That as a result of this shift in the balance of forces, the remaining socialist and anti-imperialist countries and movements became isolated and exposed. They were forced to make difficult compromises in order to survive, developing the tourism industry in Cuba, for example, signing the nuclear agreement in the DPRK, agreeing to nuclear disarmament in Libya and Iraq, accepting US-brokered peace processes in Palestine, in Ireland and other places. But that the era of the stabilization of global capitalism, during which the imperialist powers escaped the economic crisis and grew rich through the unbridled looting of the wealth and resources of the Soviet and East European peoples, has come to an end. The latest downward lurch of the global economic crisis of capitalism is being felt in the economic and the social life of every country that is connected to the global market economy. That global economic crisis cannot be avoided while the capitalist imperialist system remains, while a few monopolists dominate the entire world economy and create chaos and instability in their desperate quest for maximum profits. That the main threat to world peace is imperialism. In particular, the criminal, aggressive, US-led NATO imperialist bloc, and that we have entered a new historical phase, one in which the final defeat of imperialism has become both a real possibility and a vital necessity. That communists, socialists and anti-imperialists everywhere have a duty to join hands and do everything possible to maximize the power of the anti-imperialist camp in this titanic struggle that now confronts humanity. The recent uprisings in West Africa and the Middle East remind us once again of the unfinished struggle for national liberation, launched in earnest by the Great October Socialist Revolution of 1917 and carried on in every corner of the oppressed world, which can never be quenched so long as imperialism remains in the world. That the rewriting of history to whitewash Nazi crimes, combined with the continuing provocations by the USA/NATO and its proxies in so many countries bordering Russia and China, as well as in Serbia, Korea, Taiwan, the Middle East, make it absolutely clear that the imperialists will use any means to achieve their ends and would rather drown the world in blood than leave the world's people to advance peacefully towards liberation and socialism. That the lighting up of landmarks and hoisting of Israeli flags in Washington, London, Berlin, Paris and Brussels serve as the latest reminder of the unconditional support of finance capital for its proxies in the Israeli terrorist state and its routine export of fascism to maintain its domination around the world. We, the participants at the World Anti-Imperialist Platform International Conference in Athens, declare the following: that the history of the last century proves conclusively that the imperialists can never be appeased. All attempts at peaceful coexistence, ignoring the realities of the class struggle, have led only to the emboldening of and further aggression by the imperialist powers, and of the dominant US imperialist cabal in particular. That to break the power of finance capital, to do everything possible towards cutting off its access to the huge super profits that are extracted at the expense of the oppressed masses in the colonized world, who are thus held back from development and denied a chance to live in dignity and prosperity, is the first duty of communists, socialists and anti-imperialists everywhere. That whether by the nationalization of essential raw materials such as oil, uranium and lithium, by building alliances to counter imperialist economic sanctions, or by evicting imperialist troops and their fascist proxies from their territories. Every movement that strives for political, military or economic independence and territorial sovereignty in the oppressed countries is blocking the imperialist drive for domination and holding back the ability of monopoly capital to loot freely. That there is thus an absolute necessity to bring together the struggle for socialism with the anti-imperialist and anti-fascist struggles, and to unite all those who are struggling separately into one unstoppable force. In particular, we must demonstrate to the workers in our own countries the essential unity of those fighting for their liberation in Donbass, in Palestine, in Burkina Faso, in Niger. We must demonstrate that the wars being planned by the imperialists against the DPRK and against China are a part of this same quest for domination, and we must maximize support for all the forces of liberation. That this means doing everything possible to increase the economic, military, and logistical difficulties for the imperialists, and to strengthen the solidarity and support for those who are fighting on the front lines. That during this titanic struggle, those who play the decisive role will not be those who claim to have exclusively inherited the right to be viewed as a vanguard of the struggle, but those who actually play the part of a vanguard.
That's actually a really good point. I might even quote that in my upcoming speech because it kind of fits with a point that I was going to make. I might even take that line down. That's a really, really good point because there's a whole lot of, I don't even know what you want to call it, lineage or heritage, inheritance or entitlement. There's a whole lot of people in the communist movement globally and here in the United States and in Britain, but also just around the world, who feel like because of their historical whatever, right? Because of what they were back in the Soviet days, because of some stuff that happened a long time ago, they get to be the boss, and that they get bequeathed upon them the right, to be the leaders, and they can take the wrong position, and they can endorse Joe Biden, and they can condemn Russia, and they can be awful and all that, but they're the real deal, right? The legacy of Stalin has been bestowed upon them. So even if they've completely abandoned all of that, they get to be the ones. And that's a big, big problem, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of communists, I think, who also fall into that mindset. People joke that they're kind of like the Catholic Church. People that are Catholic, they think there's one true church. And there's a lot of people I know in the CPUSA or in the British Communist Party or in the French Communist Party who are real communists. So why the hell are you in this group? That they ain't, right? The French Communist Party that supported the bombing of Libya, that supports Israel, that is voting to send weapons and such to Ukraine. Why in the world, if you're a French communist, if you're a real communist in France, why would you join this organization? Right? Well, they say it's the Communist Party. Well, it may be the Communist Party, but it ain't a Communist Party. It's a Communist Party in name only. And the Communist Party USA, same thing. The British Communist Party, the CPB, right? The Communist Party of Britain, same thing. Right. And that these people, they act like, well, because we have the title, because we inherited the name, because we have a fancy office in Manhattan that we never use, even if you don't agree with us, you should join us. We should be the only party that's treated with any legitimacy. Well, that's just got to be gotten rid of. Maybe during the Soviet days, there was some argument to be made for that. Right. That these were the parties that were aligned as closely with the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Union don't exist no more. And these parties don't support modern Russia. And they don't support many socialist countries. The French Communist Party cut off its relationship with the Soviet Union in 1978. They became Euro-communists. In addition to that, the Communist Party USA doesn't support People's Korea. They have no relationship. They offer no support to North Korea anymore. So, why should anybody who is a legit communist, why should you be in this group just because it has the historical mandate, right? And But a lot of people do it because it's a LARP. It's a LARP, right? You know, they want to be like Oppenheimer. They want to be like somebody in a movie. Yes. Are you now? And have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Why, yes, I am a member of the Communist Party. Well, that doesn't mean shit in the real world. It meant something back when they were asking people that and dragging Communist Party leaders before committees. Now, you know, that actually meant something. Right. But at the same time, nowadays, right, I mean, they're not dragging the Communist Party before committees. They're dragging the African People's Socialist Party before committees. Now they want to know, are you now and have you ever been an associate of Chairman O'Malley? Now they want to know, are you now and have you ever been an associate of the Center for Political Innovation? Are you now and have you ever been an associate of Ranjeet Brar and Harpal Brar? That's what they want to know. Right. So stop with the nostalgia. Right. Stop LARPing. Right. It does, these groups that have the mandate, well, they're the official Communist Party. Well, the reason that the Communist parties got attacked back in the day, the reason the Communist Party was illegal and its national board went to federal prison, the reason all kinds of crazy laws that are still on the books were written about the Communist Party was because the Communist Party was on the side of the people of the world, Russia and China, and the people of the world against U.S. imperialism, because the Communist Party, it called for a socialist society and it wanted to rebuild the United States. As William Z. Foster wrote about, it was going to build an anti-monopoly coalition that would realign the United States to be friendly to the Soviet Union, to let small businesses prosper, and to move towards socialism by defeating the imperialists. That was the manifesto. That was the activities. And when the Communist Party advocated that, there was heavy repression of them. But now, the Communist Party is pretty meaningless at this point. So, yeah, I mean, she made a really, really good point there.
Those who wish to play this role must be unafraid to oppose all vacillation and conciliation with the enemy, must be ready to expose all those who confuse the masses and prevent them from understanding that there are two sides in this war, and that to refuse to take a side means in practice to strengthen the side of reaction, to help the imperialists and to neutralize the working and oppressed masses. That just as before in the case of Russia and the Donbass, when the special military operation was launched to denazify and demilitarize the fascistic proxy regime that had been imposed on the Ukrainian people by the USA and NATO, so today we refuse to be intimidated by the barrage of hysterical bourgeois propaganda that is demanding our condemnation of the actions of the Palestinian resistance. Although these same imperialist media and politicians have been silent during 75 years of slow genocide, with all its attendant atrocities that gave rise to this latest outbreak of war in the Middle East. That we will do everything in our power to bring the missing context regarding the national liberation struggle in Palestine to the attention of the workers in our countries, just as we have been doing regarding the liberation struggle of the people of Donbass and the ongoing aggression against the Russian Federation. And as we will surely do in the case of any future war between the imperialists and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea or the People's Republic of China. That while preparing peace for the sake of human life, we recognize that the only way out of the ongoing Holocaust being perpetrated by the imperialist system is through liberation wars. While the US Congress declares that the USA can fight successfully on many battlefields and should prepare to launch a war against China, the truth is that the imperialists are losing their proxy war against Russia and Ukraine and will surely be defeated if they dare to launch wars in several major theatres at once. That refusing to take a pessimistic view of the global situation, we instead look with optimism at the prospect for our movement and for humanity, recalling the words of Che Guevara in his message to the Tricontinental Conference of 1967. He said, "How close we could look into a bright future should 2, 3, or many Vietnams flourish throughout the world with their share of deaths and their immense tragedies, their everyday heroism and their repeated blows against imperialism, impelled to disperse its forces under the sudden attack and the increasing hatred of all the peoples of the world." That meeting today in Athens, we uphold the spirit and legacy of resistance leaders such as Aris Veloukiotis, and most especially of Nikos Zachariadis, great son and leader of the Greek Revolution. It was Comrade Zachariadis, above all, who guided his people on the basis of socialist science, and who never lost faith in the strength and ability of the working class, affirming that whatever the difficulties and defeats along the way, history is made by the masses. There is no doubt in our minds that the imperialists will ultimately be defeated, opening up once more the possibility for human progress and civilization to advance. That we commit ourselves to advancing towards the final victory of socialism by following in the footsteps of those heroic communists who stood steadfastly at the forefront of Greece's national liberation struggle in the 1940s. These comrades showed how it is both possible and necessary to combine the anti-imperialist and anti-fascist with the socialist struggle in order to harness the widest possible forces for the immediate stage of the revolution, even while growing the communist forces and creating the best possible foundation for their further advance. That the building of the broadest possible anti-imperialist movement, willing and able to sharply confront, oppose, obstruct, and defeat the hegemonic drive of the US-led NATO bloc, is the main task of progressive humanity today. No cooperation with the imperialist war machine and its fascist proxies. No defeat for the criminal US-led NATO imperialist bloc. Victory to the united forces of anti-imperialist resistance.
Yeah, so that was the statement of the conference, the declaration of the conference that we attended in Athens, Greece. So I'm really glad that Elizabeth represented us there. I'm really glad they put out that declaration. That was pretty neat. So yeah, I'm getting a little bit of a headache. So, but I got a couple other things I wanted to show you here tonight. Saving my energy for the big speech I'm going to give on Saturday. But I do want to, last night I did this open stream. It was kind of random where I just debated libertarians. So I thought there were a couple highlights from that stream that are worth pointing out. I'm really glad I had the opportunity to do the stream, because for every libertarian I debated, there's thousands of people who have these thoughts in the back of their mind, right? Who have pro-imperialist ideas, who have anti-communist, beliefs. And so I have three highlights from the stream, short highlights from the stream that show me debunking various anti-communist lies. Now, this first one is this guy comes on here. You can tell he's been listening to right-wing media lately, right? Because right-wing media is on an anti-China kick. And their argument is the Chinese Communist Party has never done anything, has never accomplished anything. Communism failed everywhere because of the Great Leap Forward, because of a famine that happened in China in the early 1960s. And so he tries to give me that argument. You can tell this kid, he's been reading, there's all kinds of books about this and specials about it. And if you're in that right-wing universe, the Ben Shapiro universe, right? If you watch Babylon Bee, the YouTube channel, they have all kinds of videos about how communism means you don't have any food. That's like their big joke. Ha ha ha. In communist societies, there's no food. Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, I mean, it's, this is like the thing that they're trying to do. This was a particularly valuable moment where this kid, I don't know how old he was. He looked young. This kid comes on the stream and he's been pumped up by, he just read or watched a lecture or something. He just read or watched a lecture about that. And so, yeah, this is how I took him on.
Of poverty in the 19th, 20th century.
Okay.
Do you know anything about the Great Chinese Starvation?
Yeah, I do, actually.
It was pretty good, right? Yeah, let's talk about that.
All right. Yeah. So what was China like before the Chinese Communist Party came to power?
Oh, it was terrible. And it got much
China like now.
It got much better after they killed all of the people by stealing
No, what is it
farms.
like now? I'm asking you, what is it like now? What is
China like now?
Compared to how it was before?
So you're saying that
no.
The greatest
Is China better off now?
So
have millions of people been lifted from poverty? How many power plants were there before the Chinese Communist Party came into power?
Oh, well, did they have pickles
there? How many
there?
are there now?
Did they have
how many
pickles?
Steel mills? Did you know? Like, what is that? Right? What was he getting at there? Is this like, is someone claiming they had no pickles because of the famine or something? That was weird as hell. Well, did they have pickles there? Wow. China didn't have a single steel mill before the Communist Party came to power. Now they make half the steel in the world. Did you know that?
Before the Super Bowl era, China was way worse off. So
before the Super Bowl era, before we had Super Bowls in America, China was way worse off. Okay. And who got China better? Who's been running China since we've been having Super Bowls on American television?
So I think since we started having the Super Bowl every year.
Were there famines before the Chinese communists came to power? Were there famines before they came to power? Now, who cured the famines in China? Hundreds of millions of people were dying every year. Over and over and over, people were dying. They had the century of humiliation where
hundreds of millions
all the time under capitalism, under free trade, people were dying. The Chinese Communist Party came in. They
imperialism
brought tractors to the countryside. They brought tractors to the countryside. They mechanized agriculture. And yeah, in the 1960s, there was a horrendous famine in the early 60s.
That just came about. It just came about.
That cured.
It came about.
No, it was a result of the fact that China was an underdeveloped country. That's what it was the result of. It was a result of the fact that China had been an underdeveloped country for so long, and they were rapidly trying to industrialize. And they clearly made mistakes in the process of industrializing. But then the Chinese Communist Party are the ones that prevented China from ever having something like that again, which happened all the time before they came to power. That's what you're missing. It's like, do you see his face? He's like, wait, what? But I heard that the communists, they just took power and then they took all the food away from people because they're evil. Like, what is he talking about? Right? You know, I mean, I don't understand this. Like, so, I'm trying to think of an analogy that might be good, but it's like, what might be a good analogy? If someone's a drug addict for 20 years and then they go into rehab, and after they've been in rehab for a year, they relapse, right? And then they go back into rehab and then they never use drugs again. Is rehab responsible for them using drugs?
Oh, so you're saying the opposite is true for communism?
I'm saying that communism cured China of having starvation. And you're saying that because there was an episode of starvation in the early 60s, that doesn't count.
Well, what actually happened in 1959? What happened?
In 1959, there was
what happened? Did someone come to power?
Policies that they were trying to rapidly industrialize. The Soviet Union cut them off, right? The Soviet Union had been helping them develop, and the Soviet Union cut them off. And they had people misreporting how much they were growing, and there was confusion, and it led to a disaster. The same kind of disaster that had happened over and over and over again. There was a famine in 1928 where millions of people died. There was a famine in 1946 where millions of people died. There was a famine in 1890 where millions of people died. There was famines all the time. Are those famines the fault of capitalism?
So your analysis is that the Great Starvation that happened in the late 50s and early 60s
is not representative.
Of the your characterization.
Bad thing that happened one time that the Chinese Communist Party cured does not speak for the entire experience of that.
I want to ask you though, and I broke your rule.
Back to my drug rehab example, right?
Well, I broke your rule.
Uses drugs for 20 years, goes into rehab to stop using drugs, then relapses in rehab for a year, and then goes back into rehab and never uses drugs again. Did rehab cause them to be a drug addict?
So my question to you,
in that
situation, it is rehab's fault. Yes, in your retarded
really, even though
analogy.
Them.
So
see how desperate they get. They start using insults. He's like, "Your retarded analogy." Well, I'm saying you're blaming the entity, the Communist Party that cured starvation, for starvation. I mean, it's not that hard to understand that this is logically not coherent. But it just had a relapse during the curing process.
I want to know what you're honest, and let's have a good faith. Let's have a good faith discussion here.
China before the communists
is your assertion that it was a lack of central planning that caused the Great Starvation in China? It was a lack of central planning caused that?
My assertion is that the Great Leap Forward was a failure as they were trying to set up what they'd never had before, which was a modern agricultural system. And as they were bringing tractors to the countryside, and as they were building power plants, and as they were constructing a national plan in order to get rid of these things,
something the free market didn't do anywhere.
Actually, yes, the British forced free trade onto China with 2 opium wars and forced them to have free trade, and they didn't have a modern agricultural system. That is true. And all over Africa, people are hungry and living on arable land that could grow food, and they're not growing food because capitalism is preventing them and the domination of imperialism. Yes, all over the world, people are kept in poverty. People are prevented from developing technology and modern farming. The imperialists go out of their way to prevent countries from having electricity. The British kept China divided, where different regions fought against each other. Different regions were controlled by warlords, and Tibet was separate and had the Dalai Lama. And yes, actually, capitalism did prevent them from doing that before the Chinese communists came in.
Something that wasn't able to be accomplished by the free market anywhere else in the industrialized world.
Really? Because there were hundreds of millions of people that died before the communists came in. In 1928, Edgar Snow, the author of Red Star Over China, talked about how he was in 1928 in China and millions of people were starving to death. And one of the main reasons they were starving to death was because China had no central government to mobilize relief. When the crops failed in one area, the government had no ability. There was no central government. There were warlords that controlled different regions, and they had no ability to bring food. Yeah. And that Great Leap Forward thing. I mean, it's so easy to debunk, right? I mean, it would be like, it's like on the level of stupid, right? Like, it would be like, if somebody got raped in America and you made a documentary about it and said America's a rape country. I mean, it's such a selective interpretation. You look at the Chinese Communist Party, no organization in human history has ever raised that many people out of poverty. But they just have this, there was a famine in the early 60s, which there was. And they think, oh, got it. I mean, it's so ridiculously, it's not logical in any conceivable way. It is completely illogical. Right. And it only works because people want to believe it. Nobody would accept that argument if you made it about the United States. If you said, oh, American capitalism doesn't work because there was this thing called the Great Depression in the 1930s, no one would buy that. But because people are predisposed to hate China, they've been primed their whole life to hate communism. Somebody just walks along and says, well, there was this bad famine. Oh, yeah. See, communism doesn't work. Blah, blah. I mean, it is not in any way a logical argument. Right. And so that was good that I had that exchange. But there's a couple other, there's 2 other shorter segments from last night's debates with libertarians that I want to put on because, it was important that I did this, and I'm going to do it again in the future. I am going to do it again in the future because, I feel like, these are all arguments that people in your life are inevitably going to make. Right. They're going to make these arguments, in your life. You are going to hear people make these kinds of arguments. You need to have answers to them. And a lot of people watching this now probably have questions about this kind of stuff on their minds. So this is another part where I was debating another guy. And this guy tried to say that that central planning of the economy leads to tyranny, which is an interesting premise. That's a very common libertarian premise, that capitalism, because you have different corporations that are competing with each other, it leads to the power is more widely distributed and you don't have, tyranny. You have more freedom or something. So this is a good exchange.
Once you create a central plan,
we're trying to violently overthrow the government. I mean, what are you talking about?
Well, what I'm saying is once you create a central plan to give certain government officials control over all the stuff, you create a super magnet for all the power hungry people who are megalomaniacs. And of course, that's what happened with Stalin. That's what happened with
corporations all the time. I mean, are there people in capitalist corporations that are power hungry and megalomaniacs?
Yes, but they only control a tiny proportion. So they cannot engage in the kind of, let's face it, if you give government control over all the stuff, How can you have freedom of the press if you can't own a press? How can you have freedom of religion if you can't own a place of worship?
Well, I don't think we have freedom of the press now, and we can own a press, and it's
well, you
private,
can, but it's very. I would agree with
by
you.
Big corporations, and they repeat lies, and social media is rigged by, we saw how the FBI is coordinating and with Twitter in order to push certain messages.
Put it here. High five. Yes.
Yeah. So, well, see, and that's actually really beautiful. And there were a number of moments like that in these debates where, like, he heard me say something that he really agrees with as a libertarian, right? He's against the American establishment, right? And so I'm against the American establishment too. And a lot of the stupid woke leftists are not. So that moment there was really, really beautiful. I think that was a really, really beautiful moment. We're obviously going to argue more intensely later, but that was really important. Right. And this is why it's important to have these kind of conversations, because this is somebody who is on our side when it comes to social media censorship. He's on our side when it comes to the tyranny of the tech monopolies. He's on our side when it comes to military intervention. So that was really neat, actually. Well, I mean, we have our private system, and I don't see any freedom of the press. I see, mass engineering and social engineering. It's just being done for the people with the most money. Right. Whereas in the Soviet Union, it was being done by a force that came out of a popular revolution that was in opposition to the rich and powerful. So,
the rich and powerful became the force that was.
When I was in Iran, for example, Iran's not a Marxist country. They call it not capitalism, but Islam. And they were talking about how in Iran, they have elections, but they have this thing called the Guardian Council. Right. And the Guardian Council selects which candidates are approved before the election. Right. And the Iranians, they said to me, you have the same thing in America. It's called Wall Street. They select which candidates get treated as legit candidates and which don't. And see, he agrees with that, right? He agrees with that too, because he's against the system. But Wall Street just got its position by having the most money. Whereas our Guardian Council, these are the people that led our revolution, that overthrew the Shah, that are the most devout Muslims and the religious leaders. So who would you rather have guiding your democracy? Whoever just happens to have the most money, or people that are in line with your values and your system. And I couldn't argue with them. I mean, I would give you this as an answer. There's scarcity. As long as you have a society with that, there's going to be some people who make decisions and some people who won't. Right. And so wouldn't it be better to have the people who make the decisions be people who are in opposition to the rich and powerful and are accountable to a network of a well-organized population that is trying to carry out their popular will than it is to just be accountable to whoever has the most money?
Well, first of all, I would say they're not accountable, and history has proved that they can go. But
yeah, so that was how I was able to kind of speak to him there. And that what was neat about that moment was there was a lot of agreement that kind of came across when I talked about the Twitter files and stuff like that. And and you could tell he's not ever heard arguments like this, right? Because most leftists don't make arguments like this. They just talk about people being racist. And on top of that, we did agree about the American establishment. We are both against the American establishment. There's one other clip with that guy that I thought was pretty neat. And that was this is when we talked about North Korea versus South Korea. So there we go.
The central plan in, say, North Korea versus the many plans in South Korea. If you want to compare the central plan in, I don't know, Taiwan versus China versus Venezuela versus Costa Rica, Chile versus what has been Argentina up until last week.
Okay, so this is an article from BBC. I want you to see this, right? This is an article from BBC. And I'm showing you the headline of the article, right? It's called North Korea Struggles to Control the Changing Economy. But I just wanted to show you the article where it came from. But now I'm going to show you what a section from the article I would like you to take note of, right? This is BBC. This is not communist news. This is not, state media from North Korea. This is BBC.
State media from Britain. Okay.
Britain, who is their enemy, right? I mean, not a big fan of North Korea. Economic miracle. At one time, North Korea's centrally planned economy seemed to work well. Indeed, in the initial years of the creation of North Korea, mass mobilization of the population with Soviet and Chinese technical assistance and financial aid resulted in an annual growth rate estimated to have reached 20%, even 30% in the years following the Korean War. As late as the 1970s, South Korea languished in the shadow of the economic miracle north of the border. That's BBC, right? When the Soviet Union existed, And look at his facial expression. Like, he's totally stunned. Like, you know, he has no idea, right? Because no one, it's just in economics and academic economics, they just gloss over. It is a lie through omission. And this guy is a professor of economics, apparently, that I was debating. I mean, he's an academic economist. And it's just, you know, I mean, people, I mean, they do everything they can to just obscure basic economic data that shows that socialism works. When they weren't isolated, when they weren't, you know, completely locked out as they were in the 90s, the North Korean economy was actually doing quite well. The food crisis and all that came in the 90s when they couldn't get access to petroleum, when their major trading partner was destroyed. Also, you mentioned South Korea. South Korea has a largely state-run economy even today, but especially in the 70s under Park Chung-hee, it was like the military was running the economy. POSCO, their steel industry, was created by the government. The car manufacturers were created by the government. It was a largely state-run economy. So South Korea's economy, where you had this kind of Bonapartist military authoritarian state backed up by the United States that murdered leftists and tortured people and had prison camps, they still had a huge amount of state control over the economy. So South Korea is not an argument for free market economics at all.
Well, I would disagree. I mean, North Korea has a per capita GDP of $800.
Now,
the world,
right
now.
But South Korea, you know, the
South
boom
Korea
in South Korea is largely
well
the
in the
result of state
40,000s.
control, right? I mean, POSCO, the steel industry,
Which one
was
had
built
more
by
state
the
control?
government.
Which one had more state control, North Korea or South Korea?
At this point, yeah, North Korea obviously has more state control, and you'll see that in
And
the
always
70s,
did,
until the
back to
1970s, their
1940s,
economy was doing quite well. I just read you, BBC said they were languishing in the shadow of the economic miracle in the North until the 70s and 80s. In the 50s and 60s, their economy was doing very, very well, according to the BBC.
Yeah, but there was no miracle. It was. I mean, you know, if it evaporates to $800 per capita,
yeah,
that's not a miracle. If it evaporates, if it's gone.
That's
it's
later,
not a miracle.
though. That's after the Soviet Union falls, after the USA piles all kinds of sanctions on them, after they cannot import petroleum. You know how vital oil is in our modern economy. They couldn't import any of it. They had a food crisis imposed on them by the West. They're completely locked out of the world economy, right? And as a result of that, things were very bad in the 90s. They called it the arduous march, but it wasn't like that before. They were actually quite prosperous until the fall of the Soviet Union. And that's a fact. And South Korea is the result of a huge amount of state central planning and state intervention also. So that argument is just
again compared to what?
Comparing North and South Korea, I mean,
do well. And if
both
South
of them
Korea
had huge amounts of state involvement in the economy.
South
Both
Korea
of them had
has.
huge amounts of state involvement. Park Chung-hee was, you know, I mean, he was setting up corporations. The USA was forcing Japan to lend money to him. The military was running things. It was not a free market economy in any capacity. None of the Asian tiger countries are. And this is a really common thing. Milton Friedman does this.
Any of the data. It's
Milton
not based
Friedman
on any
does this,
you
and
say,
Hong
Nicaragua's
Kong
doing really
was
well
not
compared
a
to
free
Costa
marketplace.
Rica.
A huge amount, you know, Singapore, there's a huge amount of government involvement in the economy. Taiwan in the 80s, a huge amount of government involvement in the economy.
Most of it's not socialist.
Well, it's not socialist, yes, but it's Bonapartism, it's military control.
Isn't your argument that socialism is better? And when there's
my
no
argument
socialism, how does it
is
do?
that you need state central planning, and that these countries, the Asian tigers, were allowed to develop with state central planning for capitalism, much like Saudi Arabia, much like Singapore, Taiwan. They were able to use central planning because the USA needed them as a buffer against China and against the Soviet Union. And the United States pulled out all of its money. Remember the crash of the Asian markets in the late 1990s, right? They pulled out all of their money and wrecked them. And that, you know, Lee Kuan Yew was fighting with the Clinton administration, and Park Chung-hee was probably killed by the United States, right? I mean, it looks like that because he wanted South Korea to have their own nuclear weapon. Yeah. So, that was an interesting exchange there. But, you know, that's a common thing people do. I think it was Donald Rumsfeld. He showed a map. You know, he said North Korea versus South Korea at night. Look, North Korea is all dark. See, communism doesn't work. I mean, that's just not a logical argument. So yeah, I'm glad I did those exchanges. I'm going to post those clips. They're scheduled to go up later this week as standalone clips so people can see them. And, you know, I hope to do more kind of conversations like that on this channel. I noticed there was a lot of people watching and, you know, a lot of views on that. It generated a lot of buzz. You know, I'm really glad I did that. It was kind of a smart gimmick. I did it kind of randomly. And I think it was a really productive thing to do. I did see that there's going to be Rage Against the War Machine #2, which is going to be, it's called like Oppose the Deep State, something like that. We'll endorse for sure. I'm sure CPI will become sponsors of that. Why wouldn't we? Right. All right, folks. Now I've got a Rockfin tip to answer from Ellie that came in on the Rockfin. I don't see any Rumble rants, and so why don't we do the roll call? Names and locations. Then I'm gonna put some music on. I've got a couple songs I'm gonna play just because I like music, and then I'm gonna answer people's questions. So Ellie's first because she was in the Rockfin. And then I'll do the super chats. I'll do anything else that comes in. So names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. We got Ryan in Kansas who is with us tonight. Welcome, Ryan. We got Nate in Chicago, Windy City Socialist. We got Sue in Hollywood. We got Rice in Adelaide, Australia. We got Mark Jones in Utica, New York. We got Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. We got Rupert in England, Rupert Fellows. We got David Fox in Bendigo, Australia. We got Christopher in Texas. We got Pan American in South Texas. We got Tyler in Missouri. Shout out to you, Tyler. Jamie in St. Paul. South Korea, Alan Rice. Scott in Miami. 441825 in Ohio. John McCarthy in Chicago. Orange County, Molly McGuire. JD from the Libertarian Graveyard of Quebec. That's grim. Anthony in Detroit is with us tonight. Colin in Greensboro. Judy and David from Nevada City. Welcome, Judy and David in Nevada City. Welcome, welcome. I always love it when couples are on here and they put both of their names. It's always sweet. They're listening together, right? We got Christine Peach in Missouri. Welcome, Christine. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to have you with us tonight. Names and locations. Is this green scale? No, it's just the background. I've got a new setup here. This is what I use to do my RT hits. This is the RT, home studio stuff. And so some nights I'll do the bookshelf. Some nights I'll do this. Just depends. I'll switch it up, but it's not green scale. No, this is actually a screen behind me, a physical screen behind me. Alex from Brazil. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Someone's all right. All right. Sam in Milwaukee. Sam is awesome. Go subscribe to Sam's channel. He does great content. Good stuff. Oh, there was another video I'm going to show. I'll show it later. All right. On the Rockfin, we got Ellie in Chicago is on the Rockfin. On the Rumble, we've got Ivan Chow. Ivan Chow in Sydney is watching on the Rumble. Very, very good. Very, very, very good. Very, 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 very good. All right. So here's how we're going to do it. We got Balthazar in Oakland. All right. So here's how we're going to do it, right? So first, I just wanted to put on, Caitlin from Richmond. Shout out to you, Caitlin. Glad to have you. All right. Very good. Very, very good. So first, I wanted to put on an Irish song that I just really like. I played it on here before. The Minstrel Boy, the one with the happy ending, right? That talks about a world without war. It's quite a sad song from Ireland, but during the U.S. Civil War, it was, getting everybody down in the dumps. And so they wrote a third verse about how, we're going to achieve a world without war eventually. So I'll put that on. And then I've got another song that I want to play kind of ironically as a little bit of a joke. And then I will start answering people's questions. And then I want to show you another video from our good friend Peter Coffin because it was awesome. And I want to show that. And then if there's any more questions, I'll answer them. And then we'll be done. Might be a long stream tonight. We're at about 1 hour and 18 minutes. So let's see how it goes. Oh, and Terry's with us. Shout out to you, Terry. She's streaming a lot. You should go subscribe to Terry's channel. She's always streaming about different topics, always stirring up controversy in a good way. All right, we're going to put on the Minstrel Boy. Then we're going to put on the ironic joke song. And then after that, I'm going to answer questions. And then we're going to watch the Peter Coffin video. And then I'm going to answer more questions. And then we'll be done.
of death you will find him. His father's sword he hath girded on, and his wild heart strong behind him. Land of song, said the warrior bard, though all the world betrays thee, one sword at least thy rights shall guard, one faithful heart shall praise thee. The minstrel fell, but the foeman's chain could not bring that proud soul under. The heart he loved ne'er spoke again, for he tore its cords asunder, and said, no chain shall sully thee, thou soul of love and bravery. Thy songs were meant for the proud and free, they shall never sound in slavery. The minstrel boy shall return again, when we hear the news we will cheer it. The minstrel boy shall return again, torn perhaps in body, not in spirit, and then may he play his harp in peace in a world as heaven has intended, when all the works of war shall cease and every battle must be ended.
Alrighty. So that's the minstrel boy. So now, because of the fact that we are all having, you know what's happening on Saturday, right? We are having the first national convention of the Center for Political Innovation. It is going to be absolutely awesome. It's going to be just tremendously awesome. We're sending out the press releases today. There's already 123 people that have registered for it. I mean, the door knockers are going out, and now the press release just went out a few hours ago. It's going to be at the Tumwater Ballroom in Oregon City. Now that's public, right? We're releasing the name of the venue. Tumwater Ballroom, Oregon City, Oregon. It's happening. I'm so excited. I am so excited about the event. So many great speakers and all of that. Hey, one thing, if you really want to help us out, right? If you want to make sure that events go smoothly, if you want to drop $5, I've been asking, that has been my challenge lately, right? I know that people often don't realize the power of small contributions, but if you want to just drop $5, a mere $5 into the Give, Send, Go, that will make Elizabeth Young, our president, who's handling these funds, very, very happy, because she's juggling a lot right now. That would be awesome. But yeah, so this is going to be the first time CPI has ever had a national convention. Now, we had a conference in March called the Summit Against Hypocrisy. And we've had different conferences and training schools, but this is the first time we've had a national convention of the Center for Political Innovation. So I decided to issue a challenge, and this is kind of fun. This is a fun challenge, right? I don't think anyone will do it, but then again, that creates a moment for someone to surprise me, right? This is a challenge, a tongue-in-cheek, friendly challenge, because sometimes we just have to laugh at ourselves a little bit. Now, I told you all how much I love the music of Cornelius Cardew, right? The extreme communist lyric, British communist composer. I love his stuff. And as much as I love Cornelius Cardew, right? And he was the leader of a certain strand of like hardline Enver Hoxha pro-Albania communists, right? As I listen to their music, right? Oh, thank you, Gala. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited, and I'm really glad. Thank you so much. And as I'm listening to their music, right? I came across a song. Apparently, the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist, was going to have its third Congress. And for their third Congress, the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist, composed the Song of the Third Congress. So I'm going to play now the Song of the Third Congress of the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist, with my tongue in my cheek. I'm kind of, every time I put this music on, I kind of laugh at it because it's a little bit dogmatic. But here we go. The Song of the Third Congress.
The Third Congress was written for the Third Congress of the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist, the Congress of the Victory of Marxism in Canada. It was first performed at the closing rally of the Congress in Montreal, March 13, 1977.
No antagonism, no progress is the banner of the Third Congress. CPCML, swimming against the tide, has made the Third Congress the proletariat's pride. The bourgeois state is our enemy, and our weapon is the party. Like a mighty fist raised against the foe, the Third Congress strikes a deadly blow. Combat or death, bloody struggle or extinction, thus ever place the relentless question. Like a mighty storm sweeping across the land, the Third Congress hails the birth of the new man. Like the spring sun makes the flowers grow, the Third Congress has given us the rose. No antagonism, no progress. A red salute to the Third Congress.
Yes, they had the Third Congress of the Communist Party of Great Britain. I'm sorry, the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist-Leninist, the CPCML, and they wrote the Song of the Third Congress. So my friendly challenge to anyone who's watching and has any musical ability, I challenge someone, and I don't think anyone will do it, but I could be pleasantly surprised. I would like someone to compose the Song of the First Convention. The Song of the First Convention of the Center for Political Innovation. Who will compose the Song of the First Convention? Who will do it? Who will do it? Could you make a playlist with all this? I guess I could, Gala, if you really want it. There you go. Who will compose the song of the First Convention of CPI? That could be fun, right? Who could do it, right? So if somebody watching right now has musical ability and feels like they could write the music and the lyrics, send me a video, send me yourself singing, somehow put together the Song of the First Convention. Gala already likes the idea. I love the idea. So if anyone is inclined, maybe there's no one in our community who feels like doing it. Maybe people have got other things on their mind, which we're all juggling about a million things. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow early in the morning, like 3 a.m. And boy, we got a lot of things to do. But if somebody has the time and the interest and would like to have a little bit of fun, I challenge someone to compose the Song of the First Convention, the Song of the First Convention of the Center for Political Innovation. I would be impressed. Right? I used to watch Third Rock from the Sun. Did you ever watch Third Rock from the Sun? That was one of my favorite shows when I was like a kid in the 90s. And one of the running jokes on the show, it was in a couple different episodes. They had the Mission song, right? Do you remember this? The Mission song from Third Rock from the Sun. It's like, the plot of Third Rock from the Sun is that they are aliens, right? They're aliens who come to Earth. They're aliens and they've come to Earth and they've come to Earth. They're pretending to be humans. And at one point, they start fighting over because they can't remember the lyrics to the mission song. Apparently, their mission to Earth has a song for it. And I thought that was hilarious. And it's like the lyrics of it are very bad. And it's so I'll put that on, right? A nostalgic television moment. Then I'll start answering people's questions. Then we'll watch Peter Coffin, right? All in a day's work. So first, we've got, I'll put that on, the mission song from Third Rock from the Sun, right? So there we go. Third Rock from the Sun, the mission song. Great moments in television. I think this is from the last episode of the show. They revived the mission song. There was an episode where they started fighting. Yeah, Gala knows the show. She loves John Lithgow. I have the ability and no time. That's okay, Sam. No obligation. But somebody who does have the time and the ability, compose the song of the first convention. But here is the mission song from Third Rock from the Sun.
Across the void we come a-warping, across the fields of stars we soar. We pledge to land and spaceship, and when at last our mission's finished, in duty homeward shall we fly. Our glory cannot be diminished, back to the heavens in our mighty spaceship.
Yeah, that was the mission song. I remember the mission song. I immediately thought of that when I heard about the song of the Third Congress. I couldn't help but laugh at that. All right. So first question comes from Ellie, and it's actually a rather serious question. We were joking around about songs and stuff, but Ellie asks, "Hey Caleb, do you anticipate U.S. Customs confiscating Jodi's pamphlets, maybe suspending her First Amendment rights in solidarity with UK authorities?" Well, good question. I don't anticipate that, right? Jyoti is a citizen of the United Kingdom. And just like any other citizen of the United Kingdom, she has the right to enter the United States without a visa, right? If you're a UK citizen, you can enter the United States. You don't need a visa to enter. You can just come into the country. So my expectation is that they will respect her rights. Now, I generally get messed with at U.S. Customs. When I was coming back from Russia, I got messed with. It wasn't, when I was coming back from Iran, I really got messed with at U.S. Customs, right? But Jyoti is just a UK citizen coming to the United States. She's not visiting countries that are at odds with the United States. Not that I know of, and maybe she is, but I don't know about her international travel history. So as far as I know, I don't think Jyoti should have any issues, but we shall see. But, the USA does not at this point have laws against symbols, right? That's what's unique is the UK, they have these hate speech laws, whereas we don't have those here yet. We have them on Twitter, we have them on Facebook, etc. That's what they were able to use, right? Their argument is that the cover of the pamphlet, because it has a Star of David and a swastika, that's offensive. Right. Because the pamphlet does talk a lot about Nazi collaboration with Zionism. Right. I mean, that's a fact. Hannah Arendt, the CIA intellectual, wrote a whole book on this. It is a fact that there were Nazis who collaborated with Hitler, who thought Hitler was good because it would make the case that Jews have to move to Israel. Right. That Jews needed their own country. Right. That is a fact. And the cover of their pamphlet has a Star of David and a swastika, and the pamphlet makes the point, right? It makes the point that there was Nazi collaboration, with the Zionists, right? And that is true, right? And while the communists fought against fascism, right, that there was Nazi Zionist collaboration, which is a historical fact, right? And that makes that point. And you remember that Ken Livingstone, former mayor of London, he said this. He gave an interview and he pointed out, well, it is true that, that Zionists who were anti-communist collaborated with the Nazis. that's a fact. And he got canceled on the internet. He's like, I'm just telling you true things. That is actually true, right? You know, there's all this endless talk about Palestinians and about the fact that, like, what is it, the Grand Mufti or some, you know, some Muslim leader among the Palestinians, you know, made pro-Hitler statements. There's a huge emphasis on that in Zionist propaganda. Well, why can't we talk about the fact that, you know, the revisionist party, which was the second largest Zionist faction, right? The main Zionist faction was Haganah, which was the Israeli Labor Party. They were social democrats. But the second largest faction were right-wingers. They were called the revisionist party. They were the precursors of the modern-day Likud party of Netanyahu. They praised Hitler. They called themselves Jewish fascists. They said what Hitler is doing for the Germans, what Mussolini is doing for the Italians, we want to do for the Jews, that anti-Semitism is to be expected on the part of Gentiles, and it's good that Hitler's coming in because he'll make the case that Jews need to move to Israel. You know, that happened, right? And that there were all kinds of meetings between Nazis and Zionist groups about, you know, trying to make arrangements, you know, for Jews to be sent to Palestine, you know, et cetera. That happened, right? And Hannah Arendt, who was, I believe, herself Jewish and was a CIA anti-communist, you know, intellectual, she wrote a whole book about this. And it's just a historical fact. I mean, it happened, right? The Nazis and the Zionists worked together, both ethno-fascists. I mean, that's one way of putting it. And so, you know, just pointing that out, right, as a historical fact, which is important because there's an endless attempt to link anti-Zionists to Nazis, to link the Palestinians to the Nazis, is a completely legitimate point. So at this point in the USA, we don't have a law against talking that way. In Britain, they do, though, right? So we shall see. You know, I've had trouble at U.S. Customs many times. You know, as a U.S. citizen, I have the right to enter the country, right? You know, and they can't block you from entering the country if you're a U.S. citizen, but they can make you miserable at U.S. Customs. And, like, you know, when I was coming back from Iran, they did everything they could to make me miserable. They would screen me. U.S. Customs would screen me in Abu Dhabi. Usually, I would fly. You couldn't fly directly to Iran at that point. I don't think you can still, even after the Iran nuclear deal, you can't. So I would fly from Tehran to Abu Dhabi, and then in Abu Dhabi, I would get on the plane to the United States, but you'd have to go through U.S. Customs in Abu Dhabi, and then you'd re-enter the United States as a domestic passenger. So I would get, you know, through U.S. Customs in Abu Dhabi. I would always miss my flight, right? And sometimes they would have guys, I kid you not, I would get off the plane from Tehran in Abu Dhabi, and there would be two guys waiting for me, two U.S. Customs officers waiting for me right at the gate. I mean, right at the gate as I got off the plane. They would escort me to the U.S. Customs area, and they would sit there and try to talk to me for 4 hours, 5 hours. You know, they would have printed out my articles that I'd written. They would have them printed out and stapled and be like reading passages out loud to me. What does this mean, Caleb? What does that mean? You know, hey, and you wrote in your article here, what did that mean? I would just sit there because you don't have to answer any of their questions. There's like 3 questions you have to answer. Your name, your address, the purpose of your trip, you know, if you're carrying anything back into the country. So I would just sit there. And I would say, not going to answer that, not going to answer that. And I'd be like, you know, if you just answer our questions, Caleb, we'll let you through. You know, just answer our questions. Tell us about all the political groups you work with. Tell us about your income. Tell us about this. Tell us about that. And I'd just be like, not going to answer your questions, not going to answer your questions. And they didn't like that. And sometimes they made a point of being really nice. Other times they made a point of being real assholes. You know, the good cop, bad cop routine. But I would just sit there, and usually 4 hours, sometimes 6 hours. I would always miss my flight, right? I would always come back into the United States a day late because they would hold me, right? In some cases, they would, you know, I would have to just sit there in the airport. Other times I would get a hotel. You know, I'd have a hotel in Abu Dhabi, you know, and, you know, it's shitty. You know, it's shitty. But it is, but, you know, I mean, but if you're a U.S. citizen, they don't have the right to deny you entrance. So, you know, that's been my experience. But one thing that people don't realize is that you are under no obligation when you go through U.S. Customs, right? They can stop anybody going through U.S. Customs, anybody. But you are under no obligation to answer their questions if you are a U.S. citizen. Now, if you're not a U.S. citizen, they have the ability to make you answer questions in order to come into the country. So that's one thing, right? They can say, well, you're not answering our questions, so we won't let you into the country. They don't generally do that, but they can. You know, it just really depends, right? It really depends. So, you know, yeah. And it's a way of intimidating people, you know. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And I still, you know, I still actually, I am sharing actual info. This is important legal information. You know, I still get stopped by U.S. Customs. It's not as bad as it was. When I was coming back from Iran, I mean, it was nuts. They did not want me going to Iran. I'll just tell you that much. You know, it was, you know, coming back United States, it's like, get ready for 6 hours of, you know, cops yelling at you, basically. But, you know, now when I come back, they'll search my bags. They'll ask me a couple questions. You know, they always make a point of searching my bags, right? And, you know, I mean, I don't have anything in my bags. So, you know, whatever. There's been times they've searched my person. They don't find any hidden anything on me either. So I'm not stupid. Right? But I don't know. You know, the last time I was coming back, this was amusing. The last time I was coming back into the country, that was when I was just coming back from Russia. You know, they searched my bags, and the guard who's searching me, he's like, "What? You know, we're supposed to search your bags, Caleb. Like, you know, your name is Caleb. We're supposed to search your bags." They said, "We're searching your bag for currency." They told me, right? And they said, "Have you been caught smuggling money back into the United States before?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, that's weird." He said, "Usually we only search people's bags like this if they've been caught before smuggling money or something back in the United States." I said, "Well, I've never smuggled anything into the United States. I've never had any legal issues. I've never been charged with a crime. I mean, I was arrested at a couple protests, you know, but all of that, I got what they call DCV in New York City. Whereas if you don't get arrested in the next 3 months, your charge is dropped." But yeah, the guard and the guy at the airport at U.S. Customs who was searching my bags, he's like, "This doesn't make any sense." He says, "You're not the kind of person I search." And he told me that I'm in the category where they search you because you have been caught smuggling before. And I'm like, I'm not a smuggler. So there you go. There you go. Right. That reminds me, I don't know. There's a comedy show, right? There was a comedy show there was like a British comedy show that used to be on American television. I don't know if you remember, it was called Coupling. It was kind of a stupid British comedy, but there was one episode where, you know, where like, you know, this, what is it? That one of the guys is like mad at his girlfriend and he's fighting with his girlfriend. And they're like, "Why are you fighting with your girlfriend?" And he says, "Well, she asked me why men don't smuggle." And I said, "Because it's illegal, because it's dangerous, and because we have less body cavities." And then later in the course of the episode, she finds out that what she's actually asking is not why don't men smuggle. They're asking, why don't men snuggle? And that's the joke. But I don't know. I thought that was funny. But yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Anyway, you know, I mean, you have to feel sorry for the people doing that at sometimes. You know, you do, because it's like, wouldn't it suck? Wouldn't that suck? Yeah. There you go. Wouldn't it suck if your job was to search people's bags when they come back into the country? That would suck, right? Your job is to sit there and like print out my articles and ask me questions about it. And yeah, it would suck to be one of those jobs, you know, it would suck. But anyway, so I hope that answers your question, Ellie, and thank you and best wishes. I know I'm going to see you at the convention. I think you've already registered. So there we go. So now I'm going to start answering people's super chat questions. Portland, let's go, says Reestablishment. Very good. Yes, let's go. See you in Portland. It's going to be a badass event. Tumwater Ballroom in Oregon City. Be there at 10 a.m. Doors open at 10 a.m. And we got a full agenda. Many speakers, many guests. Yeah, we got... I mean, I don't want to ruin it, but there's some interesting plans. We're not just... So there's going to be David Rovics is playing his music, right? We're going to obviously have speakers. But there's also some plans for some other stuff. You know, there's going to be, I guess I'll just put it at this. There's going to be, it looks like, not guaranteed, some kind of theatrical performance at the conference, right? Some of the comrades are putting together a theatrical performance that they're going to do during the conference, right? So I'm excited. And, you know, we're doing the flag ceremony and stuff. We're doing it a little differently than we've done it before, right? We want to take we always want to be full of surprises. You never want to do the same shit over and over and over again. Nobody likes that, right? So looks like there's going to be some kind of theatrical performance. There's going to be, David Robics is going to perform his music. He's going to be speaking about his document that he wrote about cancel culture. And yeah, it's going to be pretty awesome. Going to be a pretty awesome time. See you in Portland. I'll respond to that, John, and thank you for the super chat. All righty. Max Blumenthal tweeted out a polite invitation to Tulsi Gabbard to come on his show and debate recent events. Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard has let a lot of us down, but that's okay for Max to do, and he did it with RFK too, and I respect that. But to be honest, I am just, I'm looking at Tulsi, and it's funny because she's not just talking about Israel now. She's saying good stuff now too. In addition to the bad stuff she's saying about Israel that I vehemently disagree with, she's actually saying some decent stuff, but I can't show the videos of it because how would the Palestinians feel? How would the people in the Muslim world that I'm supporting, how would they feel to show a video like that of Tulsi? And it's just, RFK and Tulsi, they dropped the ball. I mean, maybe there'll come a time where they come around to being better again. But at the moment, I'm keeping my distance, and it's really unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate because of the fact that, Tulsi said so many good things about Russia, about China, about Iran even. And now she's canceling it all out, right? She's canceled it all out. And like the stuff she's saying, she's blaming Iran for the situation in Gaza and calling for attacks on Iran and stuff. And she's a warmonger all of a sudden. Tulsi Gabbard was like the voice of reason among the U.S. military establishment and all of that. And now she's a vehement warmonger and ultra-Zionist. And she was always pro-Israel. There was a lot of Islamophobia in her past. My theory is that there's a faction. Definitely won't say that on this stream, but I have no ideas about smuggling. But anyway, there's a faction in the ruling class that in the Pentagon that thinks Russia is a useful ally to fight Islamic terrorism. Michael Flynn. I have been in the same room as Michael Flynn before because he would come to the RT studio sometimes. I never had a chance to talk to him, but Michael Flynn, he did RT interviews and stuff. And that if you listen to what General Michael Flynn, who was Trump's national security advisor for like a week and then got fired, General Michael Flynn, if you listen to what he said, his feeling was that Russia is a useful ally in fighting Al-Qaeda, right? And it's true. Nobody is better at tracking Al-Qaeda than Russia, right? They've been fighting Al-Qaeda for a long time, right? The Chechen separatists, they're Al-Qaeda, Islamic extremists, Wahhabis, right? In Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden, like they've been fighting Osama bin Laden back when America liked Osama bin Laden, right? So, and in southern Russia, they've been dealing with it, Russia is it has the most Muslims of any non-Muslim country in the world. Did you know that? There's no non-Muslim country in the world that has more Muslims in it than Russia. And, Islamic extremists who don't like the Russian government or didn't like the Soviet government have been a problem in that area for a long time. So they have gotten really good at fighting those people. They've become experts, right? Putin solved the Chechen thing, right? Chechnya, before Putin came in, there was a civil war going on. There was killing and hostage takings and bombings and all of that. And now Chechnya is rather peaceful, right? And Putin solved it, right? And that the Russians are very good at fighting Wahhabis and Islamic extremist types, okay? They're very good at that. And that my feeling, if you listen to Michael Flynn, his feeling was that America should team up with Russia because then they can fight Al-Qaeda together. That was his feeling. And I think that is probably Tulsi Gabbard's feeling also. Now, she didn't put it that way. But I think that's what it was. And in her mind, right, if your main goal is to fight Islamic terrorism, right, and that's your focus, you're not like a communist, you're not an anti-imperialist, that's just your focus. well, then, they see Hamas as Islamic terrorists. They think Israel is also a useful ally in fighting Islamic terror. And that's what I think is going on there. Right. And this is what people don't get is that, the fact that Michael Flynn, Tulsi Gabbard, who else? I mean, there's other people, RFK and others, they weren't good. They weren't full on communists. They were pro-Israel. They have a streak of Islamophobia or whatever. But they said all the good things that they said about peace with Russia and all that. Does that mean that we should just, want nothing to do with them? They're phonies. No. That means there's a division in the ruling class. And that's an opening. That's a door you should walk through. It's too many people on the internet. Think about politics in terms of good people versus bad people. Stop that. All right. Abraham Lincoln said all kinds of racist shit when he was first running for president. He said he didn't want to free a single slave. But there was a division in the ruling class between the Southern plantation owners and the Northern industrialists. And luckily, Karl Marx and Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass attached themselves to Lincoln, even though Lincoln was not a good guy in their view. Lincoln was not an abolitionist. Lincoln said he didn't want to abolish slavery, but he just wanted to stop the grip. He was against the power that the slaveholders had over the U.S. society. And that opening led to what? The Second American Revolution. Right? And that you have to be strategic sometimes. And when there's a division in the ruling class, you have to jump on it. So it's like there's all these people. I've gotten all these messages. Caleb, we got you. You were supporting Tulsi Gabbard. You phony. It's like, no. Right? I saw a division in the ruling class. Yeah. Lincoln had what was called a team of rivals, called a team of rivals. Yeah, exactly. Right. And you have to pursue any opening like that. Right. So, and we're going to continue doing that. Right. I mean, look, Reverend Milhan Stevens here in New York City. He is a pastor of Manhattan Family Church, friend of mine. Is he a communist? No way in hell is he a communist. Right. He is a hardline anti-communist. He's a conservative, right? His religion says that communism is Satan, right? But they believe that Korea is the nation chosen by God to bring peace to the world. That is a part of their religious beliefs. And on that basis, he organized the New York City Peace March, right? And they gave a platform to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church that's being persecuted. We participated in this rally, CPI, where there were rabbis and Muslim imams and Christian ministers that was organized by Reverend Milhan, who's an anti-communist Korean pastor who believes that, that in his religion, unificationism, they believe that the Korean people have been chosen by God to bring world peace. And that they believe that that North Korea is the representation, the modern representation of Cain from the Bible, right? And that South Korea is the representation of Abel from the Bible. This is what they believe. And that if Cain and Abel can reconcile and forgive each other, then there can be world peace. That's what they believe, right? And so they have worked harder than anybody to bring about peace and peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And so he organized the New York City Peace March, and so I organized people from the Rage Against the War Machine Coalition and CPI and the People's Party to go to it. And it was a really successful event. It was really important to have a peace march to the United Nations. That was a really, really great thing that we did. I'm really glad that we did that, and I consider Reverend Milhan Stevens, despite the fact that we vehemently disagree about many things, I consider him to be a good friend of mine. Right. And there's a division in the ruling class, right? His church that runs the Washington Times, they're Republicans, they're well connected, but they want peace with North Korea. I shouldn't say they support North Korea. They want North and South Korea to reconcile. That's what they want. They want peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Right. And so that's an opening. And so I've made friends with a guy from a very conservative anti-communist organization because you have to jump on any possible opening. Okay. Right. Rage Against the War Machine. Great example of that last year. Last year, there was a huge rally, February 19th, the Libertarian Party, Tulsi Gabbard, and all that. We sponsored it. We were donors, actual sponsors of the Rage Against the War Machine rally because of the fact that we saw that how important it was. And, there's been Rage Against the War Machine #2. It's called End the Deep State, Defund the Deep State, something like that. It's just been called. We support that, and we're going to sponsor that as well, right? We'll be just as much a supporter of that, right? Amen. That is absolutely true, John. That is absolutely true. You're absolutely true, and I will address that. But that's what you have to keep in mind about all of that. So anyhow, there you go, John. That's my answer to that. But yeah, I mean, if Max can debate Tulsi Gabbard, that'd be great, but I don't think she will. Just like RFK didn't end up debating, what's his name? Debating Max either, right? I don't think she will. And Tulsi Gabbard is an active duty soldier, right? And that's the one thing to remember. She's not a veteran. She is a soldier. She is a U.S. Army active duty person, and everything. And it's very clear that her campaign and all of that, they called her a Russian agent. She wasn't a Russian agent, not at all. She wasn't that. She's an American agent, right? She represents a faction in the Pentagon that had disagreements with the overall U.S. foreign policy. I mean, that was very clear, and that's fine. And we see openings like that as good, right? That's the point. That's what being strategic is about. We had a reception gala. I didn't speak at the actual rally. Elizabeth Young spoke at the closing rally in front of the White House, gave an amazing speech, which we cannot find video of. If anyone has a video, that would be awesome. And then we had the reception afterwards for Scott Ritter, which was packed. It was packed, standing room only. The whole place was filled for Scott Ritter. And I spoke. I gave a beautiful speech at the end of our reception after it. It was really awesome. So yeah, no, I didn't speak at the actual rally, but we were on, our logo was on every Rage Against the War Machine flyer, every Rage Against the War Machine poster. We were an official sponsor and part of the coalition. So there you go. There you go. All right. Next question. Is neo-Trotskyism common among groups like PSL? Well, Thomas, this is where it gets complicated. Okay. What is neo-Trotskyism? Now, if by that you just mean people that, the word neo, right? If neo just means modern or contemporary, right? That's what it means, right? When they talk about neo-Nazis, they're not talking, that means not Goebbels, not people in the 1930s in Berlin, but contemporary or modern people that are doing that. Right. If you're a neo-fascist, that means you're not a Mussoliniite. You're somebody nowadays doing it. Right. If you're, a neo-Luddite, right? It doesn't mean you're somebody back in England in the 1800s who's against technology. That means you're somebody now who's against technology. Right. Neo just means contemporary. Right. The Neo-Malthusian Society of Britain that was started by Rockefeller. And they wanted to say, well, we like Malthus's ideas about overpopulation, but we're modernizing them. Right. Neo, that's what that prefix means. So here's the thing, right? There is a group of people who call themselves neo-Trotskyists, and those folks and PSL don't agree with each other, right? If by neo-Trotskyism you mean people that are in our contemporary time acting like Trotskyists, that's another thing. But there is a group of people that call themselves third camp Trotskyists or neo-Trotskyists, right? So generally, this is important stuff. It's complicated, right? This stuff is complicated. This is some of that inside baseball, that communist inside baseball. And, you're all here. You love this. I know you love it. You love the communist inside baseball. That's why you're here. You love communist inside baseball. So yes, I'm going to indulge this answer. All right. Trotsky, he was the he joined the Bolsheviks right before the Russian Revolution, was a leader of the Soviet government, whatever, had a fight with Stalin, fled to the West, right? And as he was kicked out of Soviet Russia, he started his own communist movement. And his communist movement he started, right? The Bolsheviks, the communists of the world were organized into the Third International. You like it so much, you sent me a super chat. So there you go. Leon Trotsky, and his followers, they're like, well, Stalin sold out and all that. So they started the Fourth International. And it was a group of people around the world who denounced Stalin, and they were called the Fourth International. And the Fourth International was called by communists, they called them the Trotskyites, right? And they were like the enemies of the Communist Party USA, the enemies of the communists of the world. They were a group of people who said that Stalin had sold out the revolution. And there's a lot of really good cartoons. Somewhere I've got a book that has some of these old cartoons. The Daily Worker. I think well, I'm not going to get the book, but there's an old, there was an old, the Daily Worker and the New Masses, which was the literary magazine of the Communist Party. They had really good like cartoons ridiculing the Trotskyites. One of the cartoons, it has like a really rich woman who's like drinking champagne, and she's like, she's like totally turned on by this really, good looking guy who's wearing this like revolutionary outfit. And she's like in awe, like she's just like in awe of this really sexy man. And she's like, he's going to start a Fourth International. and that's really funny because they're hinting at the fact that Trotskyism was like a middle class radical thing, right? And I mean, and I saw that cartoon and I died laughing. I thought it was brilliant. This woman is like in awe of this sexy guy in an outfit. He's going to start a Fourth International, and then there's another cartoon where, it's got like some rich people that are at a party and they've got champagne or whatever. And it's like, and they're holding up a book. And they say, wow, it's an amazing critique showing how Stalin has sold out communism and has abandoned the revolution. It's so good, we just sold it to William Randolph Hearst. Ha, 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 ha. And they laugh about it. And it's just showing that Trotskyism, they said it was left in form. It looked very radical. But in essence, it was serving imperialism. That was the critique of Trotskyism. That, yeah, sure, what they wrote, it seemed really revolutionary and really radical. But the essence of what they were doing was demoralizing people, telling people that the Soviet Union was no good, trying to weaken the communist parties of the world, right? And it's a lot like Judas Iscariot in the Bible, right? Judas, right? What does Judas Iscariot say to Jesus, right? He's like, Mary Magdalene pours some, she pours some perfume on Jesus, and he's like, oh, that money could be used for the poor. How dare you? And then, it's like Judas Iscariot, in his mind, he's the real Christian, right? Jesus is just this sellout, but he's the real, and that's how traitors always think that, right? Traitors never want to admit that they're just sellouts, right? No. They're the real, they're really radical, right? And that was the veneer of Trotskyism, is we're so communist that we're going to help the imperialists destroy and isolate the biggest communist country in the world. And that's that. It's a mindset that people get into, that their grievance or their difference is so important that they can work with the enemy because, they're so much more important, right? It's rooted in like an ego, right? It's like, well, I've been slighted on a personal level, so therefore I can go work with the enemy because I've been slighted on a personal level. And you see it everywhere in life, right? People turn on their friends, etc. That's what Trotskyism is, right? But anyway, so Trotsky started the Fourth International. And the Fourth International, their position was, they said the Soviet Union was still what they called a degenerated workers' state, meaning that it was still socialist in its economic foundations. But they said it was led by a counter-revolutionary, parasitic bureaucracy. That was the language that they used. They said they weren't against the Soviet Union, but the people running the Soviet Union were a parasitic, counter-revolutionary bureaucracy. Okay? And that's what Trotsky believed. Now, Trotsky died, right? 1940. Somebody ice-picked him in the head, probably somebody who was working with the Soviet Union, but maybe not. I mean, some people maintain that's not completely proven. The Soviet Union after the guy got out of prison, he went to Cuba and they gave him a big parade and gave him a medal and then sent him back to the Soviet Union. So I would assume that, and there's transcripts of conversations many times, there was a trial where Trotsky was found guilty of, counter-revolutionary crimes and sentenced to death and abstentious. So I think it looks to me like Stalin killed Trotsky, but some people, my good friend Jyoti Brar, Ranjeet, they maintain, no. They say there's no proof of that. Why give, so, hey, who am I to say? I wasn't there. I don't know why the guy ice-picked Trotsky. I would assume that, but anyway. So Trotsky died, right? World War II happens. After World War II, you had the secret speech that was given by Khrushchev. And the secret speech like rejuvenated Trotskyism because it was the leader of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union saying all these lies about Stalin, all these things about Stalin being a dictator and being authoritarian. All that was true. So Trotskyism kind of rejuvenates. And nowadays you have three types of Trotskyists. Right? And this is where it gets interesting, right? You have one group of Trotskyists that you would call what I would call orthodox Trotskyists, right? And those are people that they like labor unions. They kind of support socialist countries, but not really. You know what I mean? They say that Cuba is a deformed workers' state. They'll say that Vietnam and North Korea are deformed workers' states. But if there's ever any protest movement against the government, if there's ever any pro-U.S. human rights activism, they'll support it. But they kind of think that the socialist countries are still socialist, and they really like labor unions, and they're really into labor unions. Socialist alternative is probably the biggest of this. This is mainline Trotskyism. Socialist alternative, the Socialist Workers' Party, the old SWP, they were like this, and that they like labor unions. They kind of like socialist countries, whatever, right? That's mainline Trotskyism. Then you have a group of weirdos that people call Orthodox Trotskyism or Ortho-Trots, the Spartacist League, the International Bolshevik Tendency, the World Socialist Website, the Socialist Equality Party, the Internationalist Group, the IG, the Revolutionary, what is it called? The League for the Revolutionary Party. And these are little tiny groups. And these people are crazy. I mean, I don't know what to say about them. Some of them say World War II is still happening because Leon Trotsky said that World War II could only end with a mass workers' revolution. So they'll try to make the case that World War II is still going on to show you how pure in their Trotskyism they are. Generally, a lot of these groups want to legalize pedophilia. The Spartacist League, the Internationalist Group, they take the position that pedophilia should be legalized because Trotsky said that the government should have no say in consent or whatever. These people are insane, right? There's this little, they're called Orthodox Trotskyists, right? There's a group of them that believe in space aliens. They're called the Posadists, and they believe that UFOs are proof that communism exists on other planets. And they're based in Argentina, but they have a couple people in the United States. They got a people in Britain. They're called the Posadists, and they believe UFOs and space. There's a group of Trotskyists that have just gone off the deep end. They're living on planet Mars. They're bonkers, right? The Spartacist League, the World Socialist Website. They're nuts, nut jobs. All right, so there's the nut jobs, right? In addition to that, there's a group that you call neo-Trotskyists, right? Third camp Trotskyists, neo-Trotskyists, right? And there you go. I didn't know that. I did not know that, Olympia, but there you go. And neo-Trotskyism are people that say the Soviet Union was not a deformed workers' state. The Soviet Union was not a deformed workers' state, that the Soviet Union was never socialist. Right, that after the first year after the Bolshevik Revolution, it became, they say, state capitalist or bureaucrat collectivist or whatever. Some of them think the Soviet Union was just capitalism run by the government, was making profits for Stalin or something like that. Some of them maintain that it was what they call bureaucrat collectivism, and they maintain that it wasn't the working class that ran the Soviet Union, but it wasn't the capitalists either, but the managerial bureaucracy class. There was a new class that emerged. What is it called? The professional managerial class took over, right? That was a theory that was put forward, and actually, they also maintained that Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were the same system, and it was called bureaucrat collectivism. And that's a common theory. And that they maintain that the Soviet Union, China, all these countries, they're not socialist at all. And those are the people that call themselves third camp Trotskyists or neo-Trotskyists, right? And that's what, when you asked me about neo-Trotskyism, that was the original question, right? Was neo-Trotskyism. Well, no. PSL, right? PSL maintains that China is socialist, Vietnam is socialist, Cuba is socialist. So they're not neo-Trotskyists, right? You know, PSL is PSL. PSL is basically, you know, again, all right. So I named the three big categories of Trotskyism. Well, now just to confuse the hell out of you, there's another category, which is historically what I come out of. There was a guy named Sam Marcy in New York City. And Sam Marcy was a Trotskyist, but he kind of stopped being Trotskyist, right? He decided that, you know, that, okay, well, Trotsky was right in some of his criticism of Stalin. However, you got to support Mao in China. You got to support Fidel Castro. So we're going to stop talking about Trotsky. And that was Sam Marcy. And so he tried to form his own version of the Communist Party that was slightly more radical. It was called the Workers' World Party. I was in that for many years. The Party of Socialism and Liberation is a split from the Workers' World Party, led by a guy named Brian Becker. And basically, PSL is an attempt to form a more radical and sexy version of the Communist Party. Right? That's basically what it is. In the 1980s in the United States, you know, the Communist Party, they were going around and telling everyone to vote for the Democrats because Ronald Reagan was going to launch World War III. And that was the Soviet line. And they were, you know, aligned with and taking political direction from the Soviet Union. Communist Party USA, 1980s, they're going around saying, vote for Walter Mondale, you know, vote for Jimmy Carter, because if not, we're going to have World War III, right? That was their thing. The world is going to have nuclear war. And they were focusing on registering to people to vote for Democrats, right? That was their position, right? No comment. But anyway, so the Workers' World Party, they were the height of their strength was like the early 1980s. And they were not taking political direction from the Soviet Union. They were taking political direction from North Korea, from Cuba, and from Libya, from Gaddafi, okay? And they, instead of rallying people to vote for the Democrats, they organized big anti-war protests in Washington, D.C. That was what they did. You know, and so, you know, and they represented, look, a lot of these different trends, you know, the Maoist movement for a long time was tied to China, and it represented China. And, you know, the Communist Party USA was tied to the Soviet Union. It represented the Soviet Union. Well, the Marcyites, you know, the Marcyite Party, the Workers' World Party, they were tied to countries that were in the Soviet camp, like Libya, like North Korea, like Cuba, that were more radical than the Soviet Union, right? And so while the Soviet Union was telling their ally, the Communist Party, to vote for the Democrats, Cuba and Libya and North Korea were telling their ally, the Workers' World Party, to have big anti-war protests in Washington, D.C. That's what they did. And the height of their influence was the 1980s, right? 1981, they organized a rally of about 100,000 people who marched, you know, it was called the People's Anti-War Mobilization, PAM. And it was about 100,000 people marched. It was right after Ronald Reagan had taken office, and they marched against Ronald Reagan. You know, and it was a huge, huge rally that they organized that was very communist, you know, and, you know, it was a huge communist rally in Washington, D.C. They organized it, you know, and that was their contribution. And, you know, you can read about it. There's articles about it in the Washington Post. You know, there were people that didn't agree with them who got into fistfights with them. And that was probably the height of their influence. And Brian Becker was one of the people in the 80s when Workers' World Party was rising in membership and was becoming an influential group. Brian Becker was somebody that Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, kind of mentored and trained to lead big anti-war protests. So that's what PSL is, right? And that basically what happened is Brian Becker, he was very, very good at, you know, reserving permits in Washington, D.C., setting up rallies, staging rallies. He was very good at that. He was a good media spokesperson for anti-war protests, etc. So basically what happened is during the Iraq War days, when the USA invaded Iraq, you have to remember the U.S. government was almost completely unified in invading Iraq, right? You know, Nancy Pelosi supported it, Joe Biden supported it, Hillary Clinton supported it, all the Democrats supported it for the most part, you know. But in Europe, the French were really against it. A big percentage of the British people were against it, even though the British government supported it. And so there was a lot of money that was available you could raise a lot of money staging anti-war rallies in Washington, D.C. And you have to remember also, this is like 20 years ago. So a lot of the boomers that were hippies that remembered, Vietnam and loved to protest the war and stuff like that were much younger and were going to rallies, in Washington, D.C. and stuff like that. So there were a lot of boomers that remembered the peace movement, and there was a lot of money in France and Germany and Britain and all over the world and all of that. So Brian Becker in 2003, 2004, Brian Becker, he was running this thing called the Answer Coalition, which was the Workers' World Party's anti-war group. And he was doing a pretty good job, right? The Answer Coalition was much more radical. Was much more radical than United for Peace and Justice, which was the main coalition that was But, the Answer Coalition, they still, even though their politics, they supported North Korea and they supported Cuba and stuff, they would get the permits and people would come to their rallies because they wanted to protest the war. And so they were kind of outmaneuvering the more liberal faction. And they were bringing in a lot of money. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars they were raising. The internet was new and they were organizing these protests, and these protests were showed on C-SPAN and covered in the international media. And they were bringing in millions of dollars in donations. And Brian Becker, he was a slick businessman, and he is. I mean, he's a good businessman, right? If I was ever trying to open an evil corporation that ruthlessly exploited people, I would hire Brian Becker to run it. He'd be really good at it, right? So Brian Becker, he basically said he realized that a lot of the Workers' World Party leaders were kind of incompetent. Workers' World newspaper. He was always complaining about Workers' World newspaper. Workers' World newspaper is one of the most boring newspapers ever published. I mean, there's just not, it is boring as hell. Right. They whatever. So he just said, you know what? Workers' World is a stodgy old party. I'm bringing in all this millions of dollars. Why don't I just start my own party? And so he did. And he just walked away. There was never any vote. There was never any expulsion. There was never any. It was pretty unprincipled. Right. And that's the Workers' World Party felt like this was theft. Right. But at the same time, though, and I'm neutral at this point, right? I am completely neutral. I was in Workers' World for 8 years, and we were told that Brian Becker was racist, that Larry Holmes, who is black, who's the leader of the Workers' World Party, that Brian wouldn't accept leadership from a black man. He wouldn't let the black leaders lead the party, and that Brian Becker was racist. That's bullshit. That's bullshit, right? And we were told they should have raised it internally. They needed to raise it internally and have an internal debate before leaving, and that they didn't. Well, now I've read the resignation letter of PSL, and actually they make a very good point, which was there was not room for debate inside of PSL or inside of Workers' World. If you got up and raised any question, I was in the group for 8 years, and if you ever got up at a national meeting and said, I don't agree with that, the room would go silent. The room would go dead silent. And they would ignore you. There would be this gasp in the room like, oh, somebody disagreed. And then afterwards, you would be taken aside and they would say to you, I can't believe you don't have faith in our leaders. You are not respecting the leaders of this organization. That was really uncomradely and disrespectful for you to disagree that way. And, and that's, you weren't allowed to disagree. Right. And they're right about that. They're absolutely right about that. And so, when they say you should have raised it internally, no, you couldn't have raised it internally, right? I mean, and that's totally true, right? The way it was, if you disagreed with Sarah Flounders, if you disagreed with Larry Holmes or Monica or Teresa Gutierrez or any of them, it was a crime. You were a bad person if you disagreed. So, when they said, well, we just walked away because there was no process through which we could actually debate, that's fair. I think they're right about that. And I don't think that they were racist. That said, though, I don't think it was based on the fact that they're more revolutionary or anything. I think Brian is a hustler. Brian Becker is a hustler. He raises money to run protests, right? And, that's what he's good at. He doesn't actually want to win. He doesn't want a revolution. Brian Becker wants to make money, right? Brian Becker is not interested in out of the movement to the masses. Brian Becker has no interest in trying to win over people in the red states. And that's why Brian Becker hated Rage Against the War Machine, because it was threatening his hustle. He's the king of the protest cage, and he's a leftist. He's woke, right? And how dare these right-wingers come to protest, right? So I don't take the line. I do not think for a minute that Brian Becker is more revolutionary, that PSL is truly revolutionary and Workers' World sold out. No. Workers' World wanted to do what PSL wanted to do. Brian Becker was better at it. But at the same time, Brian Becker, there was more compromise. Workers' World, one of the big positions of Workers' World is that they are against gun control, right? They believe in the Second Amendment. That is like one of their defining positions. They bought guns for the Black Panthers and donated them to the Black Panthers and made a big public display of doing that. They believe in gun rights. Their members own firearms, like in states where you can do that. Obviously not in New York, but they make a point of their members would like own guns. Every branch, you would have shooting practice. Like Workers' World, a big part of their tradition is they believe in firearms. PSL, on the other hand, if you ask them about gun control, they go, no, they won't answer it. Well, why? Well, because they're trying to recruit liberals, and liberals are against gun control. So that's an example of where Brian, because Brian is a slick businessman, right? Brian's a slick businessman. He's not holding on to the Marciite orthodoxy, which is we love guns, which was always, that was the Workers' World position. So much so they used to joke in the 70s that there was never an issue of Workers' World without a picture of somebody holding a gun in it, right? That people used to joke that like Workers' World newspaper, at least in the 70s, was like gun porn. Every issue had a picture of somebody holding a gun, a Black Panther, a Korean fighter, a Vietnamese fighter. There was always a picture of somebody holding a gun. They were just like in love with guns. And, and that's why, and I wrote many articles that I honestly, sometimes I think honestly, I think it's a little bit of an over the top position because there's a lot of parents that are worried about their kids getting shot at school. And, I am for the Second Amendment. I don't think guns should be outlawed. Okay. I am for gun rights. I believe in the right to bear arms. Right. So, but I also do think Workers' World, they went a little over the top with it. All right. Let's just be real. They went a little bit over the top with it. But PSL, I mean, where do they say? I think they support gun control. They don't say they support gun control, but you'll never find anywhere them saying they don't support it. So that's an example of Brian being a slick businessman and kind of compromising the principles of the Workers' World Party. But then again, it's not the Workers' World Party anymore. It's the PSL. Party of Socialism and Liberation, PSL, is basically an attempt to form a more radical version of CPUSA. CPUSA gets people to vote for the Democrats. PSL tells people to go to protests, and it runs the protests, right? That's what's going on there. Now, are PSL Trotskyites? All right, and I think that's more what your question was, right? Wow, you did not ask a simple question, Thomas. This is a good way of getting me to talk. Are PSL Trotskyites? I mean, they don't go around promoting Trotsky. Internally, I think they read Trotsky as part of their understanding of the Sam Marcy tradition. However, I would say that they are Trotskyites in the sense that they're neutral in Ukraine, right? They say take a neutral plague on both your houses position in Ukraine. They take a plague on both your houses convention, position on Ukraine. That's one thing. And on top of that, that they are trying to keep communism attached to Western leftism, which is very much what Trotsky was all about, right? And probably the main thing that Trotsky disagreed with Lenin about, and was consistent throughout his whole life. He said many times he no longer thought this, but he very clearly did. Trotsky wouldn't break with social democracy, right? Lenin, 1903, Lenin comes out. He says, we're going to form a party of new type. We're going to form a new party, a central committee. And he wanted Trotsky to join. Trotsky said no. All right, he wasn't going to form a new party. Trotsky said, I'm going to form a more radical faction of the Social Democratic Party. Instead of forming a whole new party to break with the Russian Social Democrats, the Mensheviks, I'm going to form a faction within the Mensheviks that's more radical. And you can Google it. It was called the August Bloc. Trotsky said, I'm not going to form a new party. I'm going to form the August Bloc because he wanted to hold on to social democracy, right? And that's a consistent theme in Trotskyism. They want to remain attached to the Western left, okay? Right? Lenin comes along and he says, we're doing something completely different here. We are a completely different movement. You know, the Social Democrats are selling out. They're supporting World War I. We've got to form a completely new group. And Trotsky's always like, nah, do we have to? Why don't we find a way that we can be the more radical wing of social democracy? You know, and he formed the August Bloc. Then later, you know, Trotsky joined the Bolsheviks in July of 1917. And when he joined the Bolsheviks, he repudiated all of that. He apologized for the August Bloc. He said, Lenin, I'm a student of Lenin. And Trotsky repudiated his entire past. Okay? He repudiated all of his history. Right? And he said, no, I repudiate it all. But then you'll notice he had his fight with Stalin. And what did he then do after he was kicked out of the Soviet Union? What did he do? He formed the Fourth International. And what did the Fourth International parties all do? They all joined the social democratic parties. The U.S. Trotskyites, they joined the Socialist Party and they tried to take it over and be the radical faction within the Socialist Party. In Britain, they tried to join the Labour Party. They were called the Militant Tendency. And that Trotsky, he just couldn't get out of his mind that the revolutionary middle class, the left in the Western countries was where the future lied. That's a really big part of Trotskyism. Trotsky, you know, he grew up in Ukraine. He was Jewish. He faced a huge amount of discrimination. He hated peasants, the Russian peasantry. He hated them. He thought they were ignorant, backwards, racist, anti-Semitic trash. Basically, he just hated peasants as a group, and he specifically hated the Russian peasantry. It was personal because they'd persecuted Jews so much. It was an ethnic thing, right? And then he lived most of his life in exile. He lived in Vienna, he lived in Berlin, he lived in Paris, he lived in London, he lived in New York City. And Trotsky was well known among like Western leftist intellectuals. Right? He was this well-known writer. He's a very good writer, a very good speaker who's Russian, who had fled from his homeland, who went around speaking to groups of communists and socialists and selling books and publishing newspapers. And he was just this well-known leftist commentator, personality, whatever. That's what he was, right? He was like a Noam Chomsky, I guess, right? He was well known in these Western leftist intellectual circles, right? And so Trotsky, in his mind, you have to stay in those Western leftist intellectual circles, right? And that was, right? That was just, and so PSL is also like that. PSL will not break with wokeness. Right? I mean, I think Sam who's watching, he was in PSL, and all they did for years in PSL was protest for abortion because that's what all the liberals were focused on. Right? The whole time he was in PSL, the only things they protested around were Kyle Rittenhouse and abortion. Why would any communist in the United States who sees millions of working people that are against the wars, millions of working people that are angry with the government, why in the world would that be your focus? Right? Obviously, if you're trying to win over the masses, you should be organizing the anti-war movement we desperately need. You should be organizing for civil liberties against the low-wage police state. You should be raising economic demands. But that's not what PSL does. Instead, they organized a group. They have their own pro-abortion group. What else? PSL organized Black Lives Matter rallies. They, wanted to jail Kyle Rittenhouse. Why? Because PSL, like Trotsky, has it in their mind that the revolutionary middle-class left is good. Okay, and that is a big part of Trotskyism. So in that sense, I would say PSL or Trotskyites, because they just can't get it in their heads that the mainstream left isn't good. But they're not the only ones. There's a lot of communists, some who call themselves Maoists, some who call themselves stuff. There's a lot of communists who just think that the liberals are good and the conservatives are bad. And that being a communist means you're like the liberals, except amped up. And that is not what communism is. As Lenin said when he was forming the Bolsheviks, we're doing something completely different here. We're starting a whole new movement. We're not starting the radical wing of the Social Democrats. We're not starting the radical wing of the liberals. We're a completely different movement. We are just doing our own thing. It's different. right? And that's, Trotskyites don't think that. Trotsky himself never believed that. But honestly, Bob Avakian, he hates Trotsky. He's a Maoist or whatever, but he's the same way. And that's one of the things I critique Bob Avakian for in my book, Letter to Bob Avakian, right? The RCP, they're anti-Trotsky, they're Maoists, but they, it's the same thing. And they're not the only ones, but in that sense, right? In that sense, you could argue PSL is Trotskyist. So there you go. I hope that's a long-winded answer to your question. But hey, you gave me something to talk about. All right. Could calls to take over the CPUSA be viable? I am just saying now what I have always said. And please do not take this out of context and make this an attack on certain personalities or whatever. Okay. If you want drama out of this, don't. Okay. I have always said, long before the Communist Party ever attacked me, long before anything happened, I always said that taking over the CPUSA was not a good strategy and was a waste of time. That's what I always said. And I always told anyone who asked me about it. A number of people, when CPI was forming, were in the Communist Party. A number of people told me they were thinking about joining the Communist Party. And I always said, join at your own risk. That was my position. I never had any interest in taking over the Communist Party because you can't. You can't, right? And I've been around. I've been doing this my whole adult life. I'm about to be 36 years old, right? The end of December, I'll turn 36. I'm 35. I've been doing this since I was like 15 years old, all right? If somebody could take over the CPUSA, they would have done it by now. Millions of people have tried that. Not millions, but it's been tried many, many times. The CPUSA is certain people's property, okay? Certain people, it is their literal property. And there's millions of dollars on the line. There's all kinds of real estate on the line. There's a Wall Street stock portfolio on the line. The CPUSA belongs to certain people. There are certain families that's their gig, right? They, their grandparents went to Moscow once a year for communist gatherings, and they grew up in party offices, and they don't really believe in communism. And the FBI is all over them, and they cooperate with the FBI, and they're completely infiltrated, and they're not doing anything. You will not take over the CPUSA. Right? You might as well to go try to trick some working class person into signing their house and car over to you. It's not going to happen. It is the property of certain people. Okay. It is certain people's property, and they're not going to give it up. And this is the thing. And a lot of communists get stuck on, and I'll just throw this out there. It's not the only thing like this. There's a radio station in New York City called WBAI. And I've been on it many times. It's like a leftist socialist radio station. It's called a community radio station, right? It's a great radio station. I've done many interviews on there. Happy to go on again, whatever. But the way it works is that if you donate so much money or you volunteer to help them out, you become a member, and every member gets votes. I know so many old communists that just sit around all day they're playing 3D chess to try and take over WBAI. Right. And it's this game that they're playing. It's like Moby Dick, right? Captain Ahab, right? The whale that crippled him. He spends his whole life. He's going to go get Moby Dick. And it's like he destroys himself. He's going to get Moby Dick. And they say, just move on with your life, But there's so many old communists I know that are trying to take over WBAI, right? And they're heavily involved in the drama at WBAI, and this faction's fighting this faction. Waste of your time, right? Just start a YouTube channel. Right. I'll go on WBAI. If someone wants to interview me, I'm happy to go on, but it's a waste of time. And that things like this happen. It's like they're going to take over the Communist Party. They're going to take over WBAI. Just don't. Right. These are all distractions. We need to get to the masses of people. That's what we need to do. Right. And there's a lot of people that get stuck in, it's like they call it a white whale. Right. Where like an obsession consumes you and destroys your potential. And that's what a lot of this is, right? Rather than getting to the masses, they're going to play 3D chess and take over the Communist Party. No, you're not. Right? Oh, they're going to, play 3D chess and take over WBAI. No, they're not. Just get to the masses. Just get to the masses. That's what you need to do. Get to the masses. Right? And I've said this many times. I've told this joke about communists in America. I'll tell it again. Right? I've told this joke before. The joke goes, there's an old communist, there's a lawyer. There's a lawyer, and he has a dream. And in the dream, the voice of God in the dream says, you must hire a communist to work at your law firm. So he wakes up from his dream and he says, all right, I'm going to go hire a communist to work at my law firm. So he goes to the headquarters of the Communist Party. He finds one of their members and he hires him. He says, I'm going to pay you a big salary to work at my law firm. So the guy comes. The first day, he takes him to his office and he says, all right, I want you to file my papers. Go file my papers. So the guy goes away. Next day, he comes back and he sees the guy there and none of the papers have been filed. And he says, why didn't you file the papers? And he said, because the Republicans. We got to defeat the Republicans. Right now, Donald Trump could get reelected and we need to get back control of Congress. And, and the Republicans have this power, this veto power. And we got to focus on defeating the ultra right. We just can't. Right now, we can't file the papers. We got to defeat the Republicans. I can't do it. And the guy says, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You're fired. Get out of here. So he says, all right, that guy must not have been a real communist. I'm going to find me a real communist. So he goes to a rally or a protest and he sees some guy from the Revolutionary Communist Party, a guy from the Trotskyite Socialist Alternative. And he's like, all right, those guys are real communists. Those guys, they'll do it. So he takes them up to his office. He says, all right, file my papers. File my papers. Goes away, comes back, and they're not there, but the papers are gone. And then he goes outside and he finds them on the street and they're trying to sell the papers to people. And he's like, what are you doing? I didn't tell you to sell my papers. I told you to file my papers. And they're like, yeah, but we made $2. We made $2. And we just got into an argument with a guy about the history of China in the year of 1300. He's like, I don't care about all of this. I told you to file the papers. Just file the papers. So he's like, all right. So then he goes and he finds somebody from the Party of Socialism and Liberation. PSL. And he's like, all right. Or from the Workers' World Party. He's like, all right, these guys, they're going to really sell the papers. So he says, he takes them to his office, shows them the papers. He says, go file the papers. Goes away, comes back. They're not there. The papers are still not filed, but there's a leaflet sitting on the table. And the leaflet says, rally in Times Square at 5 o'clock to file the papers. And he's like, oh shit. So he goes to downtown New York City, and right there in Times Square, there's a big protest cage, a huge protest cage. And there's a bunch of big speakers set up, and there's hundreds of people, and they're out there chanting, file the papers, file the papers, file the papers. And a transgender person gets up and says, the fight of transgender people is the fight to file the papers. And everyone goes, yay. And a Palestinian gets up and says, the fight of the Palestinians is also the fight to file the papers. And everyone goes, yay! Right? And I mean, somebody from a labor union gets up and says, I'm a labor union guy and I'm fighting my boss on the job. But one thing that I want all my coworkers to know is that we got to file the papers. And everyone goes, yay! And they're chanting, file the papers, file the papers. And the guy walks up to the communist he knows, and he says, what the hell is wrong with you communists? What in the world is wrong with you guys? I have hired 3 different people for 3 different communist groups, and not a single one of you will file the goddamn papers. What is wrong with you? And the guy gets a smug look on his face. He says, how dare you? Those other 2 communists, they just talked about filing the papers. But only my group, we're the only ones that actually did anything. So there you go, right? And that's communism in America. They all don't do what you're supposed to do, right? And there's always something else they can do, right? They can vote for the Democrats. They can organize rallies. They can sell newspapers and argue with each other. There's always something else. Filing the papers is getting to the masses, getting to average working class people who are angry about the fact that they're losing their jobs and homes, angry about the fact that the government is, loyal to Israel and Ukraine and not to them and not to their neighborhood and not their community, putting forward an economic program and winning people to socialism. That is hard work. There are no shortcuts in this world, okay? The shortcut is tailing wokeism. The shortcut is tailing the Democrats. The shortcut is having little rallies and being leaders of the movement. That's all a shortcut, and there are no shortcuts. The shortcuts don't get you where you need to go. There's only one way that America can get to socialism, that America can become an anti-imperialist country, and that is if the masses of people are pushed into motion, if the masses of people are won to an anti-imperialist line, right? What does Mao say? The little red book. I've got the little red book here, right? Page 118. What does it say? The people, and the people alone, are the motive force in making world history. The masses are the real heroes, while we ourselves are often childish and ignorant. And without this understanding, it is impossible to acquire even the most rudimentary knowledge. The masses have boundless creative power. They can organize themselves and concentrate on places and branches of work where they can give their full energy. They can concentrate on production, breadth and depth, and create more undertakings for their own well-being. That is the little red book, the mass line. The masses of the people are the makers of history. And the masses of the people are who we need to reach, right? Not the movement, not the Democratic Party, not the people that are going to rallies. The masses of the people are the makers of history. And that is what we have to do. And it's not easy, because among the masses, of people, there's a lot of backward ideas. There's a lot of apathy and, people not being interested in stuff. There's a lot of confusion, but that is who we need to recruit. We need to recruit the masses of people, right? That's what we have to do. We have to recruit the masses of people. And that's what we're doing in Oregon right now. We are putting door knockers on the doors of community members, right? And random people are waking up. I'll show you on the screen. This is, Christina. Shout out to Christina out in Portland. She's doing it. She's doing great work, right? I gotta open the picture first before I put it on the screen, right? Random people in working class neighborhoods, right, in Portland. What did they get on their door? They got a door knocker inviting them to come to our conference, right? Random people who never would go looking for a communist anything. They got a door knocker with the information about our conference, the QR code on their door, inviting them to come to our anti-imperialist event. Look at this, right? And they're going to come and they're going to get a message that's not supporting the Democrats. It's not pushing wokeness. They're going to hear Scott Ritter. They're going to hear me. They're going to hear all kinds of people. And we have got 123 people registered to come to this conference already. It's amazing. It's utterly amazing. And we got more people coming. I mean, it's really, really amazing. We are doing it. And we're the only communist group that's actually filing the papers, that's actually getting out of the movement to the masses. We're knocking on people's doors. We're putting on conferences, not in New York City, not in San Francisco. We're in Portland, Oregon. We're in Oregon City, Oregon. We're having events, right? We're actually doing communism. And you know what? We don't expect there's going to be an immediate payout. It's all just going to work out really quickly. But you know what? In a weird way, it is. We're seeing a bigger payout. I mean, we're a tiny group, right? We're just over 100 people, 127 people at this point, right? But people are coming. I mean, because if you just do this kind of work, people are ready for it. This country is ripe for it. People have lost their jobs. People are hungry. People are angry. People are questioning the government and the wars. And most of the so-called left, as Elizabeth said in her speech that you saw earlier, what do? Well, they say, oh, all these workers are right-wing and spreading conspiracy theories. We say, no, they're against the establishment. They're against the establishment. They're questioning the government, and we need to go talk to them and get them to understand the truth. And if we don't, somebody else is going to, and it's going to confuse them. But our job is not to defend Joe Biden from working people that are against the wars, from working people that think the FBI is a criminal organization. Our job is to win those folks over to be anti-imperialist. Out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. That is what we are about. We are out of the movement to the masses. Out of the movement to the masses. No one's done what we're doing since the new communist movement of the 1970s. Out of the movement to the masses. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All right. Anyway, next question. All right. Congratulations, Caleb. Hey, it's happening. Got work to do. We got work to do. It's going to be a challenging time, but we are going to do the work that we got to do. And thank you, Gala. Caleb, if make a playlist. Yeah, I can do that. A communist music playlist. I can do that. Yeah, that's a good thing to do. I think it's a great thing to do. Right. Customs reading your articles is probably the most learning they did in their whole life. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I mean, are they cops? I mean, they're kind of cops, right? U.S. Customs Enforcement. They're like federal cops who police the borders, right? Or no, that's ICE, right? These guys are right? So they're right. So ICE is what is it? Immigration Customs Enforcement. What are the guys at the border? What are they called? What are they? The Border Patrol or is U.S. Customs the Borders Patrol? I don't know. But I mean, I guess they're cops, right? I mean, they're there enforcing the law, searching your bags. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what it takes to become one of those. And I have no idea what those guys believe. And I mean, there you go. Smuggling ideas. Yeah, we don't condone any illegal activities at CPI. I'm not going to encourage any smuggling, any criminal activities, right? So, so yeah, I know you're joking, John, but I appreciate it. But there you go, right? There you go, right? And I'm sure those customs guys, if you ask them, they've seen it all. I'm sure they've seen it all, right? People with bags of cocaine up their butt, and right? I mean, I don't know, right? I got shoes that are hollowed out and filled with gold or something like that. I don't know. I mean, they've probably seen it all, right? I mean, think about it, right? I mean, these people, they do nothing but try to catch people that are smuggling, right? I mean, these people, they must really know how to do it, right? I mean, it must be really hard. What I wonder about is how much smuggling goes on that they allow to go on. That's what I'm curious about, right? That whole honeypot thing where they let somebody break the law for a really long time so they can monitor them and find out all their connections, and then they grab them. I wonder about that. How much smuggling happens that they know is happening, but they let it happen as part of like a strategy. And also, we also know that a lot of the narco gangs in Latin America are used as hit squads against communists, right? They were using them against the Contras in Nicaragua. And even more recently, the narco gangs in Nicaragua, when they were having unrest a couple of years ago. Turns out a lot of those narco gangs were being used. So how many narco gangs do they allow to smuggle shit into the United States in exchange for them doing the dirty work of the imperialists, right? Right. And it's like, they'll catch somebody smuggling something, right? But then they'll make a phone call. And they'll be like, all right, we're going to arrest, Jose or Juan for smuggling. And they're like, no, that's the guy who's supposed to give Daniel Ortega problems. Stop that. And we're sorry, Juan. We didn't see the cocaine. Go back, I mean, how does it work? I'm curious how this shit works, right? Because we know that goes on. So to what degree or other are these guys constant? I mean, is it just that they catch anybody smuggling and they arrest them? Or is it like they have to get permission? Right. I wonder about that, because we know that the narco gangs are in bed with the American government. They have all U.S. made weapons. They carry out assassinations for the U.S. government. They target Nicaragua. They target Cuba, Colombia, the paramilitary groups there that were dealing cocaine were heavily involved in fighting the FARC. So I wonder how that works, right? Is it like, they have to ask permission before they arrest the guy for finding cocaine in his bag or, I wonder how that works. And right. I mean, they obviously can't tell these guys who search your bags everything, right? Those guys can't know it all, right? They're not going to be like, well, we're using this group to fight Ortega. So, no, they're not going to say that to them. That would leak in for a minute, be all over the internet, right? So what are they going to do, right? I mean, is it like, do they have to ask permission, right? And how often are these guys, do they find drugs on somebody or they find hidden money on somebody? And then they get a mysterious phone call or the higher ups say, just let it go, right? We also know, right, that in addition to the fact that they use these groups for covert operations, right? In addition to that, we also know they have informants in these groups, right? They got FBI guys and CIA guys and law enforcement guys who infiltrate these groups. So what if the guy who's infiltrating, who's actually an undercover FBI agent, they catch him with cocaine, right? What does he do? I mean, does he show him his badge or, you know, or does somebody, they arrest him and then like something goes off in the machine. Don't arrest this guy. Don't arrest this guy. I don't know. I don't know how any of this works, right? I'm just a law-abiding citizen with anti-imperialist views. I don't know how this shit works. And honestly, I mean, I don't want to know, right? That movie that they made, it wasn't about, well, it was kind of about customs enforcement. The movie they made, the one about what was it called? The Sound of Freedom, right? It was a movie that all the Trumpers really liked. That movie made me sick to my stomach, honestly. Human trafficking, and that was a disgusting movie in many, many ways. I just... You know, I didn't feel good watching that movie. I was just like, oh my God, I just wanted to barf so many times. I don't know why people like that kind of shit. You know what I mean? There was just so much evil in that movie, right? The way they lured the kids there, and oh God, it made me want to barf. It made me sick to my stomach. It was just, you know, I don't know. Some people like that shit, right? Some people like to watch CSI and the shows, the murder shows and Special Victims Unit and all that. I don't. I really don't, right? I really, really don't. I know some people who watch that kind of stuff actually have trauma in their past, right? Right. And it's a way they can rewrite it, right? People that have survived these kinds of awful things, right? They watch movies like this, right? And it's a way of like kind of erasing what actually happened in their mind. And they kind of make a fantasy, they kind of overwrite their traumatic memory with like a Hollywood script. And that's interesting. You should think that people that have the trauma wouldn't watch these movies. That's not actually true, right? Often people that have survived horrendous trauma or whatever, had a relative murdered or survived, sex crimes or something like that. Often they will watch these programs as a way to kind of overwrite, to write out what happened. It's a way of dealing with their trauma. And that's very interesting to me. It's very, very interesting to me. Very, very interesting to me. So there you go. Right. There you go. Iran has done more to fight Al-Qaeda than Tulsi. Yeah, well, in Syria, right? I mean, Iran was on the battlefield battling against ISIS, right? I mean, it was the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, it was the Hezbollah fighters, the Syrian Arab Army, the Russian Air Force. Hell yeah, right? And I was in Iran. I went to a graveyard where they were burying young Iranian men who died in Syria, right? I actually was with family members, at a graveyard where they were burying guys who fought in Syria against Al-Qaeda. That was kind of a moving experience for me. I'll never forget that. All right. And thank you, Dan, for your super chat as well. Dan sent a good super chat, and I do appreciate that, Dan. Thank you very much. And, I was going to show that video of Peter's. It's a great video. I'll show it tomorrow night. I'll show it another night because yeah, we got a lot on my mind. It's almost 3 hours we've been going here. It's at 2 minutes and 52 seconds. So I think we're going to wrap things up for tonight. We're going to wrap it up for tonight. So I'm going to put on the closing music. Come to Portland. Come to the convention. We need you there. We need you there. We need you there. We need your support. Send a donation if you can. But just come. We can use your presence also.
Struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.